Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So today I got a very special guest coming on with me to talk about all things both related to Christ and being nerdy. So go ahead and
Yes.
introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and kind of what we're doing today.
Yes, my name is Christ in Comics here on social media, also known as Kentario. I am, of course, a elder at my church, the Heart Church here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. But not only that, I do YouTube videos as well as TikTok media talking about anime, manga, and comic books and associating that back to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And Nerdy Christian has brought me on to basically have that conversation, kind of express, how I got to this point, how I got to these points with my views, what I love about comic books and media like that. But even more so, what is it that's drawn me to Christ? What is it that I'm looking forward with my relationship with Christ? And diving all the way into that. But we got to be careful because if we don't, we'll probably discuss the whole Bible at some point.
Yeah, definitely. There are a couple of preliminary things that I need to get out the way. So let me go ahead and deal with those very fast. Um, for anyone who is interested, I made a video series, and this will probably be the last time I mention this, but I made a video series for Men's Mental Health Month and Pride
Mm,
Month. So you can see the playlist. Give me one second. I'll talk about what's on the screen here in a minute. But you can see that those playlists on my YouTube channel. So please go check those out. It was very interesting trying to navigate those sorts of conversations, and I think it's worth Christians talking about. So this, like I said, this will be the last time I mention it, but please go support your men. Check up on if you have LGBTQ people in life. Check up on them. Check up on your men. Make sure they're doing okay. And if there's anything you can do to help, Christ,
absolutely.
of course, modeled service for Christians, and so I think it's really important to do that.
Thank you. Amen. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one other thing I will mention, it was shown on the screen because I had it set there, but TikTok has been giving me a lot of problems these last like 2 or 3 weeks. It's kind of been insane. So,
Okay.
in order to kind of in order to kind of protect my content as well as see if there is a way to make money, I decided to go on Rumble, which is a basically a alternative platform to YouTube that prides itself off of being immune to censorship, it will say. So they have guidelines and rules, but they are much more loose than especially TikTok, but also the other big social media platforms. So it's free to make an account on Rumble. Like I said, it's a lot like YouTube,
Hmm.
except you can actually see the dislike count. Uh, um, but yeah, go check that out. Go follow me there on Rumble, so and help me kind of get started there as well. And make sure, and like I said, I can win on there because TikTok has been giving me issues, and I need to make sure that the content that I make is actually protected because TikTok will randomly um TikTok will randomly silence your videos, right? I had a blind reaction taken down. That was just a joke. And I got the appeal and I won the appeal, but
Wow.
still it was kind of annoying that
Good, good, good. But yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I think I guess the thing I could say to that is, where I definitely wouldn't mind going on to Rumble or other platforms that will actually support the content that I'm doing and support your content that you're doing. And it's not that you're wrong for going to Rumble. I completely agree with making that move. I think being business minded, you do need to be willing to make moves that you otherwise would not
Yeah.
do. Uh, I'm currently at this place of opposition means I'm doing something right. Not every time, but just as far as when it comes to doing ministry and the video gets taken down, or you're going live and you say something that offends the thing. I don't get mad about those things. I'll call it out, but I don't get mad because that means I'm at least trying to walk in the way of the Lord. So if I'm getting that opposition, I'm doing something right. And if I leave that, then the area where my ministry is supposed to be actually having that impact, where there's opposition, then I'm running away. I'm not fulfilling anything. I mean, even Paul had to go back into town after being nearly stoned to death because he said, well, "Hey, my work here ain't done yet," and he went right back into the town. That doesn't mean I should always stick on TikTok and YouTube if they keep flagging me and stuff like that. But we do have to have that wisdom to keep going or shift.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree with you on that. So, with all of that out the way, I hope you like the background.
I do.
I like adding the color. It was kind of an accident that like purple and white kind of became the theme of my account,
Hmm.
but it did, and so I was like, you know what, I'll just stick with it, even though my favorite colors are Spider-Man's colors. But we'll talk about that.
Hey, that's for later.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
for later. But the blue does suit me. So the area I'm in on this side,
yes.
perfect,
That's what.
perfect.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit of your backstory. Tell us, like, I guess how you became a Christian, and then also how you became nerdy. Go ham.
Wow, that's loaded. Well, backstory for me. Um, my dad was not saved. My mother was brought up in the faith, but she never truly gave herself over to it. Even more so, I guess you could say she stepped away throughout her college years. And my parents met in Germany. They got married, and then July of 1990, they were going to church, trying to find something else to do. With my dad being in the military, he was shifted to Hawaii. So my mom and them and myself, we were all there. Well, I wasn't born yet, but I was in the belly. And so in that moment in July, my dad was unctioned to go forward. The Holy Spirit moved on him. Nothing else mattered. He wasn't thinking about anything else. All he could think about was, I have to go up there. I got to do this. I need to give my life to Christ. They made that call. He went up and he gave his life to the Lord. He started throwing away all the secular music in the house, made my mom and my big brother mad.
Mm,
And then about what? July, August, September, October, November. 5 months later, I was born. So I wouldn't even really have a relationship with Christ in the household had my dad not gotten saved 5 months before my birth.
mm,
So I was brought up in a Christian home. And in being brought up in a Christian home, you're constantly being exposed to it. And one of the things that I can say honestly is that I do not recall when I gave my life to Christ intentionally because I was so young. And so I knew that I meant it, and I knew that I aimed toward walking that out in spite of all of the things that I went through. I won't get into the personal details of my experiences. I'm waiting to do that. I'm not fully ready to do that just
understand.
yet. But my dad actually just sent this to me. I think it was about 4 days ago, where he opened up one of his older Bibles, and it was written in the top corner that I gave my life to Christ this such at this age. I was age 8 when I officially made the declaration of my own. I was in my room by myself, and that's when I did it. Because my dad he goes around the house at night, check on everybody, and he saw me doing that when I was 8 years old. And so I officially gave my life when I was 8. I was working in the church by the time I was 10 years old. Dad started having his own church. I was helping in all different areas. I started ministering by the time I was 10 years old, serving on the praise and worship team at 10 years old. All of that I was engulfed in by that time. Now, at the same time, I was already getting caught up when it came to superheroes, Marvel Comics, DC. I loved all of it. I was watching Spider-Man the animated series. I was watching
Whoa,
Justice
that's
League,
so bad.
Batman the animated
That's
series,
so bad.
all of it. I was watching I was watching all the shows, man. I'm telling you.
Did you
Oh
watch
my
the X-Men
goodness.
animated series?
Watch the X-Men animated
Yeah.
series, Fantastic Four animated series. I was in it. I was in it hard, man. Anytime when it was Saturday morning, your boy got up. That's the only time I'll get up early happy. Getting up at 8, 9 in the morning on the Saturday, sat down in front of the television just to watch those shows. Unless my mom was dragging me to the nursing home to go minister to old people. Didn't hate it, made friends, but I really hated missing those cartoons. So I was, man, but the thing was, I didn't get introduced to anime until I moved here to Spartanburg when I was 8 years old. So that's when I saw Outlaw Star, Sailor Moon, Inuyasha, Yu Yu Hakusho, Rurouni Kenshin, Dragon Ball Z. That's when I got introduced. Gundam Wing. I got introduced to all that in that moment. It's just like all at the same time, and so it's just like this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I can't articulate it clearly, but it's like the gospel is the core of who I am.
Mm,
It's like the core of everything that I stand for. No matter what I learn, no matter what I'm introduced to, I may ask questions or I may not be convinced, but I've always drawn to the gospel above everything else. So as I'm watching these shows, when I'm looking at what I think a hero should be like or what I would expect from a villain, the gospel was the root of all of that. So when I
Mhm.
watch superhero shows, it immediately clicked back to my faith. When I watched Dragon Ball, when I watched Gundam Wing, all of those shows, there was always this connection. There's a hero that's like God. There's a villain that's like the devil. That was it for me. And so I was always into this stuff because it was illustrating what I was reading in the Bible when I
Mm.
barely could picture anything in scripture. So yeah, but that's what really got me into it. I love superheroes. Um, Not to spoil, because I know you still want to talk about that, but Spider-Man was my very first comic book hero. Very first. And for some strange reason, it's like I one thing I don't think people give credit to children enough for. Children can't articulate that they understand, but for some reason in their body they do. So, like for example, I love Spider-Man because Spider-Man was an underdog. You had Superman. I didn't care about Superman. He had all the powers. There's Batman. Batman was cool, but man, like he was a billionaire. That's that. But Peter Parker, that man struggled as a human, and then he struggled as a hero. And so I'm just like, oh, I don't know why, but I connect with all of this pain, the struggle, the fighting to choose good when evil is presented to you. And on some level, I already understood that from the Bible. So and I couldn't tell you I understood that, but I did. And so when I saw that of Spider-Man, it was just like, man, he's living out what it's like to be even a Christian, but he's not a Christian character, quote
Yeah,
unquote.
yeah.
And so that's where my connections came from. That's where it really got hooked in for me.
That's nice. That is really, really dope. Yeah. I got into really nerdy things at a really young age. I was watching because for me, because I was born in '03. So I was born
Hmm.
at a very fantastic time for media because I was born right after the first Spider-Man movie. And it was as far as I know, the highest grossing
Mm.
superhero movie of all time for a while at
Hmm.
least. So
Yes. Yes.
I was born so I watch like late '90s, early 2000s garbage of a lot of it, like Daredevil, Elektra, Catwoman, those
Come
those
on,
campy old Batman movies. The
dude. Yes.
you know
Yes.
what I mean?
Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr.
Yeah,
Freeze. I did not look. I respectfully, okay, in one sense I have a question, and then two,
yeah.
I want to say I know people give it flack. They give the old Batman movies flack and all that, but I'm like, I enjoyed it. I just thought I was watching Batman. I don't know about you guys, but all these people express all these detailed reasons why they didn't like it.
They're
I'm just
not
like,
they're not good movies, but they're goofy and campy. So it's like they don't
eh,
it's like this obviously is not being taken as seriously as no one thinks of Jim Carrey's performance and it's like, yeah, he's taking this very, very seriously. You know what I mean? Like he was good in the movie, but he was also, obviously very goofy. I
not. If you ask me, he should have been the Joker.
yeah, a lot of people have even
Mm-hmm.
continued to say that even now. I
Mm-hmm.
would love to see him as the Joker. I was thinking about him before Jaquan Phoenix.
Real,
Yeah.
real. But I guess you could say, 'cause I don't know if you've been not keeping track, but you've been aware the mental stress he's been under lately,
Oh, I was not.
or over the past 10 years, he's been going through it a lot mentally. So for him to even step into that role would probably be hazardous to his
Jim
mental
Carrey?
state.
Oh, no, I
So
was.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah.
yeah,
A
yeah.
little bit
So
about
I
that.
could see Jim Carrey not doing it, at least not now. Back then, sure. Now, no, no.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
No, that's fair.
That man would fall apart.
That's fair. Do what you gotta do for your mental health, you know what I'm saying? As we talked about
Hmm.
in June.
Now, my question was
Mhm.
though, the Daredevil
Yeah,
movie. What do you think?
that it was not it it was not the only good thing that came out of that movie was and it's so sad because Ben Affleck seems to actually like comics, but he just can't get a W. Um
He cannot get a W at all, no matter how hard he tries. Marvel, DC, he just not built for it.
Yeah, yeah, but, the one good thing though is that I kind of liked, Cuba Gooding Jr.? No, not Cuba. That was not his name. Um, the black guy who played Kingpin, the actor.
Oh, you about to open up a can of
I
worms, man.
so I thought he was okay. You know what's cool? My
What?
dad bought me a Spider-Man animated series, It
Mhm.
was fun fact, this series was actually supposed to follow the first Spider-Man movie, but it looks so
Okay.
different and has a completely different story such that you would never know. The only important plot thread is that Spider-Man and Mary Jane are doing their thing and Green Goblin is dead. But, like,
Okay.
you wouldn't be able to tell. Like, Peter's blonde in the animated or not blonde, Harry's blonde in the animated movie. He looks it's weird. Yeah, it's
Okay.
weird. Anyway, but in there, there's an episode where they have the Kingpin and he's black. He's voiced by
Mhm.
the black actor. And I was like, "That's pretty good."
Oh.
I thought he did alright. Yeah, but yeah, no. So I grew up around that time, right? So I when superheroes were when people were starting to realize that this was more than just nerds, right? Like
Oh, dude,
this is
yes.
something that is about to cross the border from something that nerds like
Mhm.
to something that everyone's aware of. Like I
Yes.
was a kid when the first Avengers movie came out. And that did I honestly think that these Marvel, and particularly Marvel, because DC was
Mhm.
lagging, but particularly Marvel has done a lot to make it actually okay in culture to be an adult and like superheroes. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think with that, I what I think helps Marvel sell is the difference that I found because I had to identify. I don't hate
I
DC,
know.
but when it comes to like DC versus Marvel, I would choose Marvel any day of the week. But what I realized was DC's good at making stories, which is why their animated series are
Oh,
successes, but their live actions aren't. However, when it comes to the Marvel's great at designing or establishing characters. So if you're establishing characters that people can relate to or get mad at or whatever the case may be because they're fulfilling their role, you're going to be more drawn to that. And granted, that does contribute to the story a bit more, but it's above all else is really characters. Everybody has someone, excuse me, by the way, everybody has somebody that they're relating to or connecting with or hating or getting frustrated with, no matter what the case may be. So think back to this, right? Now, I am an avid hater of Captain Marvel. She doesn't even deserve the title Captain. That's Miss Marvel.
oh
That is Miss
man.
Marvel. She will never be captain to me. She is Miss Marvel.
That's
But
crazy.
my reasons are two separate reasons. Granted, I do agree with the audience when they're just like, there's really nothing to her. She just kind of shows up as a powerhouse and is emotionless. Like when you're looking at Marvel, you're looking at character, expression, development, behavior. You
Yeah.
look for that. You don't get that with Miss Marvel. She's just very bland. She's like, yeah, yeah. Who's this? I'll beat him up. Pow. And it's like, we don't care for that. We'll watch DC if we want that. Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to watch
I think
Marvel
that
for that.
people have often cited like the difference between Marvel and DC is that DC is like making gods and how and telling us how they
Mm-hmm.
relate to us, and Marvel's making humans and
Mm-hmm.
telling us how they relate to uh, these ideals and things like that. I don't know necessarily to say
Mm-hmm.
how they relate to gods. I don't know if the distinction would be the reverse of each other exactly, but there is a more human element to Marvel and a more divine element to DC in that regard. I mean, that was literally that was literally the driving force behind Batman vs Superman. I don't know if people
Oh,
like, I
absolutely.
don't know how much people caught that, especially, like, in the extended edition, but, like,
Mm-hmm.
Lex Luthor's whole thing is that, like, he doesn't want humanity to have a messiah anymore. He wants them to be able to get to a point where they can save themselves, and he thinks that Superman is a
Mm.
huge, stumbling block to that. So Superman to him would be essentially be a false god or false messiah, um, and maybe this incarnation of Superman is, I'm kidding,
Mm.
I'm kidding. I love Superman. But, yeah, so
I hate
but
Superman.
huh?
I hate Superman.
That's so unfortunate. So you gotta hear me out. I also grew up with Smallville, okay? I
No, hey,
watched
hey, hold on,
Smallville
hold
with my
on, hold
mom,
on,
bro, you can't.
hold on. Don't get it twisted. I'm about to embarrass myself, and at the same time, make it clear. Now, I hate Superman. I love Smallville.
Mm,
Because Smallville, you're getting the humane
Well,
side
yeah,
to Clark. You're not getting the fix it, fix it,
yeah.
fix it. Clark struggled. Clark struggled a
Listen,
lot,
man,
man.
how
And
you gonna hate Superman, bro? How you gonna do this to
okay, okay,
us?
I'm sorry, but if you know me, who's one of my favorite anime characters? Come on, you already know.
Luffy, right?
Who is it?
Luffy,
Monkey D.
yeah.
Luffy. You're telling me that a guy who stretches is out here boxing with everybody? Everybody? He wants to smoke. And he don't just want to smoke. He's winning. Now you can say, "Oh, they knocked Luffy out." But Luffy got back up. I don't care how many times he loses, Luffy's getting back up. That's the underdog. That's Spider-Man to me. So I
That's fair.
love an underdog person who doesn't have the OP power you would expect, but with and this is where it gets really humane. With the hand you've been dealt, you can still make a difference.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair.
That's that
That's
real
fair.
testimony that I get from Luffy, that I get from Spider-Man. You don't get that from Superman.
That's fair.
You get, I could do it all, but everyone doesn't trust me. So because you hate me, fine, I'll kill you. Like I can't stand that side to
No,
Superman. I don't like it.
that's fair.
Mm-mm.
I think that um yeah, Luffy is a powerhouse. I love his motivation. Yeah,
Amen.
yeah, definitely,
Yes.
definitely. Um
Yes.
I so and this is something that we'll talk about because I've seen you respond to people who think like this, and I want to show you just a little clip of someone who of a big Christian YouTube channel who's thinking like this. Um, but there are a lot of people who think that like Marvel movies and DC movies and anime and stuff is demonic, which is really just an outgrowth from the satanic panic that happened in the
Hmm.
70s and continuing on to this day. But
Hmm.
what I like want to keep pointing out to people is that Superman is a type of Christ, and that's one of the reasons why I started liking him a lot more. Is that um, I mean, he was created by Jewish people, right? Like his story
Yes.
initially and his story was meant to resemble them, but I and I'm not saying this is intentional, but I do think that
Hmm.
as they resemble themselves in the character of Superman, they and their own Jewish concepts, they also
Yeah.
did show themes and concepts that relate to Christ as well. Goku does too, which is part of the reason
Hmm.
why I like Goku so much. Because there's if anyone doesn't know, there's a study in Christian theology called typology, which is the study
Okay.
of basically comparing and contrasting people types or shadows in the Old Testament to their fulfillment in Christ. So a perfect example of this would be Romans 5. Jesus is the second Adam, right? So Paul compares and
Yes.
contrasts
Yes.
Adam to Jesus. Jesus
Hmm.
does this. He says, "As the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up." Right. So he's comparing and
Yes.
contrasting himself. There's something similar about the snake in the wilderness, Adam and Jesus, among other things. Well, I started doing that with cinema and media in general, and oh my goodness. It was
Oh.
amazing the stuff that I found that I honestly didn't feel like I was reading into it. It honestly felt
Hmm.
like it was just because Christianity just saturates Western culture so much, it becomes the lenses by which we make things and see things.
Hmm.
And even, like, uh, non-religious, like, nerdy YouTube channels have critiqued the
Yeah.
new Superman for being like Jesus. Like, that was the problem with Justice League. Like,
Hmm.
they were literally trying to resurrect Jesus so they could just win. That was the whole thing.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I know you got a clip to play, but kind of I can't let that just be. And it's not that you say anything wrong. I'm saying like because I'm like
Oh,
stirred
go
up
ahead.
because my thing with that is I agree with not idolizing these characters as if they are an adequate replacement for Jesus.
Yes.
So, for example, right, you know how Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" versus "Who do you say that
Right.
I am?" It's like, okay, these people embodied this, but I'm the actual. And then people can make the mistake of, I totally agree, of going, "Oh, that seems like Jesus, but I really like Luffy, so let me just really focus on Luffy." It's like, no, I see Luffy demonstrating Christ-like character. Let me get more into my word. Let me get more into the Bible. Let me seek him, because if anyone knows what it means to be free, that's Jesus.
Yeah.
And so oh, that kind of focus is the thing that, with my media and with your media, that we're aiming to do, is to make those types of things clear. Because I'm a firm believer in this wholeheartedly, that the different religions across the world are attempting to tell the same story about God, about Jesus Christ, about the Holy Ghost, everything that he intended, what's taking place in the spiritual realm. They're all trying to tell the same story, they're just telling it different ways.
Mm.
And the thing is, we hold to the faith that the gospel of Jesus got it right. Because people bring this up too, right? They bring up. I'm wanting to study this more so that I can actually do a full on video talking about this. But they talk about how so many different religions, they have this son whose family died, or the son died, but then the son resurrected, or someone was resurrected, and then they saved all of humanity. So many different mythos have this story. But what these stories don't have, they don't have history to show that one person actually did it.
Yeah.
The word, the Bible proves that Jesus actually did what everyone else is just being told could have happened or may have happened. Jesus proved himself to be the one that actually do it. Just like the 10 plagues. Y'all want to worship all of these Egyptian gods? Cool. God shows up to demonstrate that he is the one that rules over all of those facets of those Egyptian gods. So Jesus proves himself to be who he says he is each and every time. And that's what I hold to. I'm gonna calm down.
No, yeah, you're good. Man. You're good. I fully support free speech on this platform. I'm not trying to sound like conservative. I'm really not. Like I don't. We're not gonna get
Uh,
into politics.
me
I
neither.
don't. I don't really care about politics, but like I also don't want people.
Me neither. Now I have my political perspectives on several different things, but yeah, me
Yeah,
neither.
yeah. So, but with that said, though, like I said, you've responded to this a lot. It looks like, from what I heard from your videos, you've actually been told this by your parents, right? Like the anime and these other things are demonic. Is that true?
Yes, yes.
Gotcha.
My crazy
Hmm.
story, and I could be getting it wrong because I was a kid when he said it, but when you say something that sticks out to me, good or bad, I don't forget it.
Mm,
That sticks with me. And so one time, because he was trying to divert me away from Dragon Ball, like he hated Dragon Ball. My parents hated Dragon Ball
man.
Z, and so he was like, "Son, in Japan, they hold these tournaments and they put these special gloves on so that they can actually shoot these blasts and do these battles." And I'm sitting there like a kid. I'm just like, "Yay! Sign me up. Let me go over there. I'm ready to fight. What do you mean?" And so, and then he kind of ended it with the Dragon Ball Z is demonic. I'm like, "But where though, Dad? Like you're not making it clear how evil it is to me. So for you to just tell me it's evil." And it's like he wasn't listening. And I'm not bashing my dad. Let me just make that clear. I'm just being open about what communication between him and I was like when I was young.
Hmm.
He would be telling me things. I would be looking at this and be seeing something totally different. Now,
Hmm.
you could say, well, that's just simply rebellion. But when I'm saying I see this verse reflected in this character, I see this behavior in a Bible verse that you've been teaching me, then tell me where the Satanism is in it, because I'm going back to the scriptures on this. What they're trying to do is what God's been wanting us to do. So I've never really been convinced of its evil
Yeah.
because of that. When I can't find it, sure, don't watch it. I don't suggest it. But otherwise, yeah, if the gospel's in there, I'm in it.
Same. Yeah. I'll show a clip a little later, but one of my favorite, absolute favorite animated movies ever is Dante's Inferno, the animated movie, and it's extremely graphic because it's literally about a crusader who's not as virtuous as he appeared on the surface. Let's say, fighting through the realms of hell to try to get his fiance. Like, and the story very much is not for anyone under 18. But
Definitely,
huh? Yeah,
definitely.
but,
I
uh,
agree.
I'll show a clip later, but, like, that story, even in its, like, Catholic context, I mean, leaving the issue of Catholic theology to the side for the moment, this movie demonstrates the gospel, I think, pretty well, and even almost gets a little critical of Catholicism in a couple of
Mm.
different ways. I thought like one of the Crusaders walk out of the church, and Dante and his friend are talking, and the the Crusader goes, uh, he just had to he just had to throw me off. Um, can you see that comment?
I do. I do. I have not looked into these. So I'm gonna do a series on Pokemon. I'm gonna do a series for the TikTok, and I'm asking people if they think I should do a Patreon or not. I'm not gonna do a Patreon if people aren't gonna sign up. That'd be a waste of my time and
Right.
others. But I want to do a Patreon and a series on TikTok talking about how Pokemon is not demonic because they don't actually have evidence. They're just going off of. You see the way that they drew that person's head? Looks like horns.
I can't
Come on.
listen. Well, my King James only fundamentalist preacher says you're wrong. So
Oh
no, no, I'm
no.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, you were kidding? I took you
No, no.
seriously. I'm like, well, what did he say? Please tell me. We can have that conversation.
um,
Oh
no,
goodness.
it's funny. So my friend Jesse brings that up because, and you can check out the live streams, but we did a debate review. A atheistic Satanist decided to go to like Michigan University, Central Michigan University, and debate the members of the Westboro Baptist Church. And it
Mm,
was the Westboro Baptist did not disappoint. Let me just tell you that right now. Yeah,
okay.
they're a very radical cult that actually lied about their racism and a number of other things.
Jesus.
Yeah, they're also hyper Calvinists.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, they're kind of Calvinists except on steroids.
Oh.
So
And,
that's fun.
so to be fair to your audience and then even to you, um, I am not theologically trained. So when it comes to like, let's say I'm just now kind of getting a grasp of SBC. So like the events with Westboro Baptist, I don't fully grasp Calvinism, Presbyterianism, all of those different things. I'm not very privy to what the differences are, and even more so where that's like maybe they're not saved. So I don't get into those type of conversations mainly because of my ignorance. I just one thing I also believe: if you don't know, don't talk about it.
No,
So I don't know, so I don't want to talk
that's totally
about it.
fair. I wish more people did that on TikTok. Maybe maybe
Oh, same,
maybe we
man.
would have less people saying that stars don't exist because the Bible says so, apparently. Um, it's like
Young Earth creationism. I'm just now getting into that too. Like I'm just like, oh,
yeah.
you're arguing about
Whoop,
this?
my
Why?
bad. I didn't mean.
Oh, you good.
Yeah.
Now people saying you're not really a Christian if you don't believe God literally made it in 7 days. I'm like, what?
It's yeah. I plan on making a video talking about why I'm not hearing of creation is currently. Yeah, there's interesting things there. Yeah. So have you ever heard of Little Light Studios?
I can't stand them. But
Oh, so
yes,
okay. So you have seen their videos.
I plan on doing a series of reaction videos. I already reacted to their Dragon Ball Z review, so I'm going to be reacting to their Marvel
That
reviews here
is
soon.
that is so perfect. I was literally going to ask you to do a review with me of them because they are insane.
Go right ahead. I'm down, man.
Uh, that is, yeah, they are insane. But yeah, no, I'll show you this clip. It's only a minute long. I don't think anyone should copyright me. Um, give me 1 second. Yeah, so this is Satanic Sailor Moon Secrets Exposed. So be prepared to be absolutely destroyed. Christxcomics.
There are a ton of questionable
Can you hear that? Okay.
Hmm.
messages and occult references that are very problematic for any Christian. I'm talking about magic, sorcery, spells, and reincarnation, and even underage drinking of alcohol.
Wow, it reminds me of when the book of Revelation describes God's people having a seal on their foreheads and the wicked having a mark of the beast in their foreheads. Also, like the opening of the third eye in Eastern and New Age religions, there's a ton of demonic possession in those shows.
Notice that there are 5 sailor girls, each named after different planets. The number 5 in the Wiccan religion represents the 5 points of the pentagram.
Hey, speaking of Wicca, these magical girls are even called guardians.
Uniting our hearts to fight as one is what makes us Sailor Guardians.
which is Wiccan lingo for the watchtowers that correspond to the 4 directions and the 4 elements. When the watchtowers are invoked, it symbolizes the connection to all things that exist, the 5th element being spirit. The series borrows...
Yeah, so you have been refuted. I hope that you turn away from your evil. I can't even.
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay.
So you know more about
All right.
Sailor Moon than I do, so please feel free to.
The thing is, I actually don't. And I say that because I haven't watched Sailor Moon since I was a kid. I just really liked the show. I was just like, whichever one, Sailor Saturn and Sailor Venus, 2 favorite Sailor Moon girls. Love both of them. And yeah, I was on my waifu phase and simping when I was a kid. And it was like, those are my girlfriends right there. Like I was like that when I was a kid. I left that when I matured. So, but when it comes to Sailor Moon, the thing about them is they are associating to astrology. They get their powers to fight to defend the earth. Sure. I get what the concept is, and even more so, it's empowering young women to do good. The thing about Sailor Moon, though, is that people are messing up. Is back when it was created, it wasn't created to introduce children to astrology, which is the misconcept that I would say takes place when it comes to Sailor Moon. Now, because I don't fully know what the story is, what their goals are, what they're looking to do and communicate, I can't say that Little Light Studios is entirely wrong. What I disagree with them on is them making those statements about this is Wiccan because of the 5-point star and this. I'm like, don't you know that the 5-pointed star, when the point is at the top, is a representation of God, is over all of creation. That's why the Satanists use the flipped version saying all of creation is over God. So you want to specify, well, what do you mean by they're the 5-pointed star? Are they the one with God above, or they the one with God below? You got to clarify those type of claims. You can't just make the claim and make us go, oh my God, they're doing that? Yeah. My daughter's not watching Sailor Moon. You don't even know what that is. You haven't even researched Wiccan behavior. So how can you make the claim? The other thing too is, and they probably wouldn't want to talk about this, the 3 wise men, what was their occupation?
Yeah.
The 3 wise men were astrologers from a non-God-fearing nation.
Yeah.
Looking at the stars like they do, making their visions and prophecies, all that they normally do. And they saw a pattern, identified it, and followed it through to find Jesus. So you're telling me that the spirit that God allowed for non-believers to pick up on him with their ungodly demonic practices to come and find Jesus. Not only were they welcomed in Jesus' presence, Jesus received their gifts too.
Right.
If it was that bad, Mary and them would have been like, get away from us with your demonic gifts.
Right.
Right? No, but they received them. So when we really want to be that hard pressed against it, everything that they're worshiping was created by God.
Yes.
We just got to get them back to focusing on the creator of it, not getting them focused on not looking at the stars at all. So that's as far as I kind of go with Sailor Moon. I don't think it's that evil.
Yeah. No, I don't either. The issue with Little Light Studios and these other people in general is the I mean, there's a few things that are happening. One of the really important things to mention is that all of this is a guilt by association fallacy.
Yes.
Just because this thing and this thing look similar, there must be a connection. This also parallelomania, right? Yeah, just because these 2 things are doing something that if you squint look the same, then they are doing the same thing. And which is once you've studied the Old Testament, for example, then you realize you cannot make this claim because pagans built temples. God had a temple dedicated to him. Other people slaughtered animals for ritualistic and religious purposes. So did Israel.
Yep.
There are times where the Bible will quote pagan and blasphemous text and actually add it to its own theology. Not completely wholesale, it's a little different, such as the insertion of monotheism or something like that, trying to make Yahweh the one who's doing this, not Baal or something like that. But it does do that. And so if you're going to make this guilt by association, then you're going to have to say that David uh, and Paul were using were demonic themselves because they
Hmm.
used messages from other material in order to make their own points.
Well, see the classic thing. Two things with that. One classic point. They always got mad at Jesus. Wow, he's talking to the prostitutes. He's talking to them poor people. He's out in the streets doing this, doing that. It's the same thing Little Light Studios is doing. They're making Pharisaic claims. And then to go a step further, I don't know the study on this. Maybe you do. Maybe y'all have researched this. But why do we anoint the forehead?
Right, it was something that was done in the Old Testament.
Hmm. And even Moses would touch people's foreheads with the blood of the animals that they would sacrifice. They would touch their foreheads with blood to their face.
Yeah.
And so where they're talking about they're putting the mark of the beast on their foreheads and opening the third eye. I'm like, well, we've touched the forehead
Right. Yeah, and that's
for doing it. That's something to actually get a better understanding of.
yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing too. An example of the second issue here. It's not only that this is parallelomania and guilt by association fallacy, or a
Hmm.
genetic fallacy as well. The connections that they make are also completely arbitrary, uh,
Yes.
because so much exists in the world. You could, with this fallacious thinking, connect anything to anything.
Yes.
So a one perfect line of reasoning I could do is say, well, what's the problem with Batman? Well, Batman symbolizes bats. Well, who else really likes bats? Vampires, and we all know that vampires are
Vampires.
evil and demonic, and that is
Hmm.
the origin of them. So therefore, Batman is demonic.
So let me I'm gonna stick there with you. I got to stick there
Mhm.
with you because I wanted to talk about this during Halloween. Vampires. Okay. Notice what the curse is. If you become a vampire, you're permanently sent to hell. Point blank. Period. You're telling me that the redeeming blood of Jesus can't save somebody who's been turned into a vampire? That's one. That's
Yeah,
one. Now, if we translate that concept to reality, right? How many people commit sins that they look at their lives and the turmoil that they're in and they say, well, God would never accept me because of all the wrong that I did?
yeah.
There's so many
With that currently.
people. Yeah, there's so many people that just stay in that pocket of I'm too dark, I'm too corrupt, I'm too evil. Jesus will never love me. Jesus could never save me because of how jacked up I am. When we put that moniker of simply saying that if you get the vampire's curse, you'll never be saved or that you're eternally going to burn in hell. There's so many people that already think that way about natural life. And then you're going to add that into that. You're really just saying, that Jesus is not for them. We set people up to not choose to follow Jesus.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I guess to take that detour with you, actually, I don't know if you ever seen the Vampire Diaries.
I have seen quite a
Yeah.
bit of it.
So
Yes.
I have a, I would say I have two guilty pleasures. It's probably, well, I don't think I'll be guilty of the other one, but teen drama, supernatural teen drama is my guilty pleasure. I grew up with the
Love it.
Twilight franchise, right? I used to like those movies,
Me too.
and then I realized they were bad, but then I can't stop watching them. But Vampire Diaries was the other one, and so
Okay.
I, like everyone else, especially the girls, was really attracted to Damon. But but
Okay.
part of the reason why Damon was so attractive to me was not. I mean, the actor does a phenomenal job and whatever, and he's attractive or whatever. But the main issue was that um, he was the thing that no one should love, but was loved anyway.
Yes.
And, uh,
Absolutely.
and 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 in theory, both those statements are true. Like, in some
Mhm.
sense, you might, because in the logic of the show, he literally, manipulates and preys on a 17-year-old girl in high school when he's, like, 100 and something years old, right?
Yeah, they don't like talking
Yeah,
about
and
that
it's
though.
it's not like Stefan, because the relationship that's presented with Damon and this other girl is literally manipulative. Like, um, um, fanging her. He's wiping away her memory so that he can keep doing this stuff
Mm-hmm.
again. It's horrific. Yet,
Yeah, I remember that.
yet
Yep.
Elena, the main female character, still finds a way somehow to end up being interested in Damon. Damon was the villain initially. Um,
Yes.
but it
Yes.
was the fact that people didn't give up on it. Now, obviously, this is also in part a very toxic situation with Vampire Diaries, and the actor
Mm-hmm.
has actually commented on this and commented on his frustration about this. But the act, excuse me, the character ended up becoming a one-trick pony because, um, as he mentioned, Damon could go into a nursing home and kill the children there, and
Mm-hmm.
then the audience would react by saying, "Well, he had a fight with Elena, guys. He's not very stable. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Like he'll come
Yep.
back." And that's what would happen repeatedly. He would be bad. Love
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to transform him, and then he maybe rides that coattail for a little bit, but then a toxic
Mm-hmm.
situation occurs, and then he goes right back. It was this
Yes.
revolving cycle over and over again. And as
Yes.
frustrating as it was for me to watch that because I wanted him to get redeemed,
Mm-hmm.
because I thought the redemption arc, I think mirrored in some ways human life with Jesus, at least from our
Yes.
perspective. Um, he did finally get redeemed at the end, right? He sacrificed himself and he did get the girl at the end. And so I do think
Mm-hmm.
that in part the allure of this sort of vampire mythology that we've created in these movies and shows is that these are people who you would initially find monstrous, hideous, and such, but then turn out that these are the people that you would end up loving for the rest of your life.
Right. And to kind of add on to this, when it comes to Elena, that I didn't realize this before, but I think I kind of realize it now. She's really fulfilling the relationship role that most women fall into. They either, like with Stefan, are being completely covered, protected, and provided for because that's what Stefan did for her. He was always her covering and her
Oh
protection and her
goodness,
shield.
she was such a damsel in distress, and Stefan was the Spider-Man to her Mary Jane. It's yeah.
Exactly. But then the other side is sometimes women fall in love with someone that they want to save. And that's who
Yes.
Damon
Yeah.
was. That was someone for her to
Uh,
save. I can be useful. I can make a difference in his life. So that's why I would want to be with him.
it's
So
evangelistic
that
dating
speaks to that
almost.
for her. Hmm.
Yeah, which is a huge problem. From experience, do not evangelistically date. Please,
Don't.
please
Yeah,
don't.
I've been there.
Please
Don't do
don't.
that. Man, that was a bad couple of months.
Don't
Like
make the
that.
same
It
mistakes I
was.
made, please.
Oh goodness.
Um, yeah. But no, yeah, and that is another thing though too. There's so much toxicity. I mean, they literally say in an argument that they are in a toxic relationship, Damon and
Yep.
Elena, because they definitely are, especially because she ended up catching feelings for Damon after Stefan got out the picture. Right, and there's
Right.
a
Right.
whole bunch of stuff going on with all of that. But yeah, no, I binge watched Vampire Diaries. I watched Legacies too.
Hmm.
Which actually this
Ugh. 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 Ugh.
What's wrong with
Ugh.
Legacies? I thought it
When
was
I tell you what's wrong with legacies, oh, don't make me call my daughter in here. Look, when I tell you now, look, my daughter finished Vampire Diaries all the way through. I watched originals all the
Mm.
way through, and me and her watched Legacies all the way through together. And when I tell you, me and her bickered about how pathetic this show is. It it was how do you go from originals all the way up here? I'm talking about Niklaus,
Klaus is a great
Elijah.
character.
Come on, come on to legacies. Like I'm about to rant. You brought
I
this on yourself. How come every time Hope shows up, she's like, "It's okay, I'm the Tribridge," and then she doesn't save the day. Everybody else does, regardless of her. It doesn't make sense.
yeah.
She would hype herself up for no reason. But then the person who was like turned out to be the best character, though they tried to make her seem like the worst character, was Lizzie.
Yeah.
Lizzie ended up being the best character.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that the twins were the best characters. Oh,
Whoa, you like Josie?
I I thought
Whoa.
I thought they were better than most of the characters. I thought the teacher was kinda he was decent initially in Vampire Diaries, but with the con
Yes,
but there was
Alaric
some
was dope in
controversy with
Vampire
the actual actor being like a
Diaries.
really weird Trump supporter and maybe racist. I mean, just with
Oh
Vampire Diaries
wow.
in general, there's a whole issue with racism, right? Because of,
Mhm.
Bonnie, the
Bonnie.
Bonnie
Look,
situation.
we talked
No,
about
well,
that
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
Bonnie treatment. The Bonnie treatment.
Yeah,
Ugh.
but in the show, the
Woo.
mentor is really just that, and it's like, well, he could've they ruined him, and it was so weird because like,
They
he
did.
ended up, like, getting married, and in a relationship with the girl whose, like, babies got in and it was a whole
Yeah,
thing, y'all.
that was
It's a
weird.
whole thing.
That was
It
weird.
was so weird because she's not underage at that point in the show, but it's also like you
Yeah.
kinda watched her not even necessarily watch her grow up, but, like, you're obviously much older, you're, like, 30s with, like, an
Yeah.
18, 19-year-old, but, like, you've been put in this situation because she was the one that decided to carry these supernatural children, right?
These age
It
boundaries are
was
not being considered at
that's
all in this show, man.
and just, make a more general comment, that's a problem with teen media in general. I
Oh
don't
yes.
I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know if it's just because you've talked about this from an anime perspective, that this definitely is a issue in anime, um,
Mhm.
but this is such an issue in teen drama, like, obviously, we have Twilight and Vampire Diaries, which are 110-year-old men
Yeah.
dating 16, 17-year-old girls, and we're supposed to like that, um, um,
And so
but
so the thing with that, man, is I don't like going down too much into that, not because it's not a conversation that needs to be had, but because of how complex it is.
mhm,
So if I'm gonna say it like this, if Edward Cullen was 250 pounds, snot nose, bad haircut, and he was trying to come for her, it would have been a problem. How could this big ugly dude who's also over 500 years old trying to flirt with this girl? But because he looks good, because he's handsome,
yeah,
we could tolerate it, right? We could tolerate it. Even that new movie with Jennifer Lawrence, No Hard Feelings.
mm,
She's a 30-something-year-old woman trying to sleep with and flirt with a 19-year-old boy.
yeah,
If now today we flip those roles and then they tried to put that movie out as a comedy, everyone would think they're sick for making this movie. Why would you want a 30-year-old man flirting with a 19-year-old girl? That's sick. They're mad at Leonardo DiCaprio for doing that exact same
yeah,
thing right now. So, but you want to put out this movie as a comedy and make it natural or funny
yeah.
for that to be a relationship. That there's something wrong with that. It doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
this is a whole issue. Pretty Little Liars, if you ever heard of that show.
I have heard of that show. I think I got through like
Yeah,
two or three
I'm pretty
seasons.
sure. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. If I remember correctly, one of the climaxes of the show was a teacher who got married to their student because there was a student-teacher
Mm,
relationship in college. I think.
right.
I mean, they're adults, but like also, this is weird.
Hmm.
And I'm sure there was some other stuff going on with that too, but there's that Riverdale. Riverdale is absolutely sick for this. I don't know if you've seen any of Riverdale.
I have, but I don't remember which instance you're talking about.
I mean basically everything. They literally will promote their content by promoting these teenagers. I mean these actors, adult actors playing teenagers as
Mhm.
being sexy and in very hot situations.
Yeah,
Archie
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Archie has gotten this, Archie and the one girl, I forget her name, but they both got this terribly. Like, Archie has literally been like they put him in all these different roles just so that, like, they can show him off as being, like, really sexy and all of this. So he ended up, like,
Yeah.
being, a sexy prisoner, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
A really attractive boxer. He randomly, I think, did vigilante stuff randomly.
Yeah. I remember that, and it didn't work for his
Yeah.
character because
The show
he didn't
randomly
even
had him
do what
fight a
he set out
bear.
to do.
The show, like, randomly had him, like, fight a bear or something off screen, and he won. He just had, like, a sexy scar on it. on his body or something.
Did they watch Hajime no Ippo or something? Is that what they
Yeah,
did?
and then the one
I
girl,
think that's what they did.
the one of the other main characters, she becomes a cam girl at um and it's worse for her because she becomes a cam girl when she's underage and she has Betty, I think her name was, because she had this like alter ego called Dark Betty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was through that like she was doing all of this stuff, and it was yeah, that
Uh,
entire show is
yeah.
an anomaly.
Let me just put this out there too. And I don't know if you do this for your audience, but for those that are watching here on my stream, uh, go ahead and just kind of preface and apologize if any of those, sexual content that we were speaking of being in these shows is tempting you or influencing you in any way. I do sincerely apologize for exposing you to that. And if that is bothering you, do yourself a favor. Go ahead and just separate yourself from the stream for a moment and get yourself together.
Yeah.
Don't subject yourself to something just because you think you're okay. Don't play with your self-control like that. Okay, guys?
Yeah, it's just a conversation that needs to be had.
Oh, I
Yeah.
agree.
I don't know
100%.
how we would change it though. Especially with, and I'm not saying this community wants to do this.
Mhm.
I don't think they actually want to do this for the most part. But like obviously LGBTQ characters are obviously like in Vampire Diaries Legacies in Riverdale and so not only have we made right the sexualizing of children in in this media worse, but we're now including LGBTQ kids in
That
becoming
makes that's another level.
as well. Now, I actually made a video arguing that I'm totally okay with LGBTQ characters in media. Like it didn't like to go back to more nerdy stuff. It didn't bother me when Supergirl's sister was lesbian in season 2. What
Okay.
bothered me was that entire season. It had nothing
True.
to do with that. I
Right. Right.
wasn't really bothered that much by it. The LGBTQ characters in the Arrowverse in general don't really bother
Mhm.
me. Uh, and like I said, my favorite characters in Legacies were the twin sisters. I think they're better than I mean, granted, the competition isn't that great, but
Right. So let me ask you that question then. So how do you feel about Christians being exposed to that? It's one thing to say for the world because the world's going to do what the world's going to do, but as believers, how do you think we should feel or view those types of things?
I'm fine with it. Honestly, I don't the this media is not Christian media. So I
Okay.
should not expect to have my full Christian worldview enveloped in something that was never made or intended for Christians. Um, and also, media is in large parts a representation of the reality. So as much as it is exaggerated, so it would
Mhm.
seem vain to complain about Supergirl's sister becoming lesbian, and it would seem much more fruitful to talk about people in real life who are lesbian and how we have those meaningful relationships in the midst of disagreement. Um, but
Gotcha.
going on a conservative media outlet to complain about the woke media just doesn't doesn't
Mhm.
seem to be of much benefit to me. And
Right.
not just
Right.
to me, I mean, just to this conversation as a whole. So and also,
Right.
I thought about this too. I wanna be consistent, right? So in Romans 1, of course, I would
Mhm.
agree with the conservative view that Paul is talking about the fall of the created order and how all of that is working, and so now, God has removed his protection from, humanity, and
Mm.
things are humanity suffering a degradation after the fall.
Yeah.
Although I don't necessarily think we are perfect prior to the fall. That's a different conversation. But so homosexuality, I would say, is in that list in Romans 1, but so is a bunch of other things like murder and a crap
Mhm.
ton of other stuff. But I
Right.
love when people murder people in my media.
I can't believe you just confessed
so,
that.
So I'm
No, I can't believe you just confessed that.
like I kind of need Frieza to blow up Planet Vegeta, right? Like, you know what I mean?
I see. Now, I guess to give my side on the same question, but to really point it out, I don't think people talk enough about the impact that Frieza's freaking finger beams had.
Yeah.
Because we're used to palm blasts. Most everybody, boom, boom, boom. Frieza show up, pew, and it's just like dead. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? No way! Like just one finger, pew. Oh, that's a problem. I always sometimes I call Frieza she. I apologize, Frieza the he. But man, was that a struggle. However, when it comes to LGBT content being exposed to Christian audiences, particularly, if it's a forceful, convince you, make you believe it should be acceptable type thing, I'm totally against it. I'm totally against it. But when you are illustrating reality, 9 times out of 10, you're at least going to meet a homosexual person. Nine
Yeah.
times out of 10. You're telling a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 season story. There's going to be somebody that likes the same sex in that series. That makes sense. Maybe even bringing in one person that's trans. That would make sense. I wouldn't be surprised if that's in there. That's why I love Degrassi. Degrassi goes through and shows you some of the hardest stuff teenagers can go through. And it's just
Yeah,
like, man, that's a
and
real reality
that's
check.
the thing about, yeah, teen media in general, is that it's going to represent the things that
Mhm.
teens are struggling with. And so as much as like
Right.
Elena's relationship with Damon is horrific and toxic, and so are some of the other relationships, there's hardly a healthy
Yes.
relationship in that show. Um, Teens
True.
don't have healthy relationships. A lot of,
Bro.
not
Mm-mm.
every time, but a lot of the time they don't. And that comes off in the media. Now, obviously, it'd be nice to have media that demonstrates healthy relationships so that people can actually know how to
True.
do this. Um, because media does affect people, right? Uh,
Right.
but also, they need media too that relates to them. How do I deal with the fact that no one wants me to sit at that part of the cafeteria? Right?
Hmm.
How do I deal with it?
Wow.
How
Yeah.
do I deal with the fact that whether it's religious or not, I'm bullied for being gay, uh, regardless
Hmm.
of how feminine or masculine I appear on the surface. I'm still bullied for who I like, um, which is something
Right.
that for the teen is not something that they're going to be able to control or anything like that, especially at that
Right.
age, right? So. Um, they need media and characters that they can relate to as well, and if it especially if it helps, their mental
Mhm.
state as well. I'm sure
Well,
I'm sure
yeah, I would go a step further and say that on some level, not entirely. So Christians here listening, hear me out. On some level, we need it.
Mhm.
And I say that because you're not looking to go out and actually establish a friendship and relationship with them, hear them out about what they're going through, hear them talk about the type of people they like, and get to the point of sharing the gospel with them. So you at least need to be able to see a great, a well illustrated depiction of some of their
Yeah.
struggles, some of their temptations, some of their actual relationships. Because, and that's what's drawn me to this conclusion that although they yes that's lust, although that's yes it's really more for sexual reasons rather than a genuine relationship at times, especially when we're looking at it in the Bible. The thing is, the events of today are different from the Bible because biblically they weren't looking for relationships, they just wanted to feel good. I want as much pleasure out of life that I can get. Now, today, sure, they want to be able to be free, do what they want. That's what they tell you. But when you have those conversations, the pursuit is actually for love. The pursuit is not to simply be with, it's not really about the same sex as much as it's about finding true love. And so we shouldn't be having a conversation about pointing out all their abominations. We need to be having a conversation about, well, what is love? What does real love look like?
Yeah.
When we get into that conversation, one, that's where we steer them to Jesus. Two, that's where we steer them to this, what you're pursuing with that person is not a representation of the love that God has established when he created man and women for one another. So we're able to actually then get to the root of the issue rather than constantly arguing about the surface and even more so causing a divide.
Yes. I would definitely agree with you there. So we need that representation so that we as Christians, or as conservatives, whatever you want to categorize yourself as, we can understand, because having a good representation of LGBTQ characters will help the world understand.
Yes,
Just
yes. That's why I like how they did it in Across the Spider-Verse. Now I know everyone was mad when Gwen had that protect trans kids poster up in the top corner of her bedroom. I know the Christian audience lost it because
I mean,
that was there.
a lot of people did.
Yeah, they were losing it. They
Yeah,
were losing it. And for me, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, oh snap, that's in there. But then I had to take a second and think. It might be to show support. It might be to say that Gwen is, though I don't think she is. It might be to say that Peter was, though, that would probably be the best representation from some of the arguments that I've seen. At the same time, it's a teenager in high school in 2020, in the 2020s. What are they going to be advocating for? What are they going to be thinking like?
right.
That's probably what especially respectfully, a teenage white girl is going to be thinking. It's like, well, protect trans kids. Like, okay,
Yeah,
I would expect to see that in a little white girl's room. So that's
and
what
fair
kind of
enough.
pulled me.
Like they're I do what you can to help people, right? Like just because we
Right.
think that same-sex acts are wrong does not in any way mean
Hmm.
that we don't need to protect those children or
Correct.
not say the person's preferred pronouns and all that kind of stuff. Right? That's kind of
Hmm.
why I think I've in my Pride Month series I've upset like both liberals and conservatives because on the one
Hmm.
hand I argue for the theologically conservative position, but on the other, because I'm so specific about what I think the text is actually saying, it has no bearing on gender dysphoria, pronouns, marriage in the government, all of that sort of stuff. So I kind of just let the rest of
Okay.
that stuff go for the most part.
I'll have to check that out and see if I have any responses to it or not. I'll have to check
Yeah,
that out. I'm interested
yeah,
now.
yeah, definitely,
Okay.
definitely feel
Okay.
free. So I'm curious. There was something that I wanted to show you. Uh, have
Please
you
do.
heard of this?
I have heard of Record
Yeah,
of Ragnarok. Now, I struggled with watching it, and I would rather collect and read the manga,
gotcha.
but I am broke. I can't afford to buy manga right now. However, yes, I am in tune with Record of Ragnarok. Hit me, show me what you got.
I thought it was such an amazing concept. So, if for anyone who isn't aware, Record of Ragnarok is an anime that was released on YouTube that not YouTube, Netflix. I don't know why I said YouTube. Uh, is was released on Netflix, and basically how I would summarize it is imagine Mortal Kombat tournament, except anime, like Japanese style anime and Greek
Hmm.
mythology. It's essentially what you
Yes.
have. You have the thing is the humans are going to have a contest against the gods, and if the humans can win, then Ragnarok will not happen, and the end of the world will not happen. So
Mm,
it's to me that was such a fascinating concept because now we're translating essentially Greek mythology into Japanese animation, which is
yes.
wild. Like I don't know if you've seen Thor in that show, but he
Hmm.
looks insane.
Dude, Thor looks
Um,
awesome. Now, you know who my favorite character is.
in the show, who is it?
Yep. Adam.
Adam. I have to think.
They cover most religions in it. Because Buddha's even in it.
Oh, really? I
Hmm.
was not aware of this.
He shows up in season 2. I haven't caught up to it. I just know he's involved. But
Dope.
think of the very first Adam. That's the Adam in the anime.
That's the
They have
that's
Adam in
so
the
cool.
anime.
That is so dope. That's something I've been wanting to do for a really long time because I feel like
Hmm.
uh we could take a couple different detours here. On the one hand, there was another quick thing I wanted to show you because I did not know this existed. Did you know this existed? There's a manga where Jesus
Yes, I
and
did.
Buddha are like roommates in Tokyo.
I might need to actually give in and read it. At first, I was like, nah, that might be crossing the line. But I really want to see what story they're trying to communicate
I
because
think it's a
I think that's
comedy.
extremely
I'm pretty sure
important.
it's like meant to be a comedy, poking a little bit of
Yeah.
fun at both. Which would be
Hmm.
dope. I don't take myself too seriously. Yeah,
Now, you do you know my theories on Buddha?
I do not.
So, a part of his history is that he was a prince living the rich life. But then upon going and walking the streets like Princess Jasmine, he was exposed to the poor living conditions, and he wanted to be able to do something about it. So he left his rich life and began to live a homeless man's life. And so while sitting up under a tree, uh, a light appeared before him. He had an enlightened experience, and that's when he began to shift his message and his ministry. And a part of the studies that I've done, particularly from school, spoke to how he was trying to tell people not to make him a god, but then we see that they made him into a god. And his name at the time wasn't even Buddha. That's just his god name, or his divine name. And so when I learned that, I was just like, so you're telling me that he had an encounter with possibly the spirit of God and began to teach the teachings of God, but then the people made him into a deity, or perverted what it meant to walk that out. At least that's what I got from my studies. And so that made me actually start to think about how much reach was God actually looking for in the world. But the only one that when they say that the one person that God found righteous was Abraham, well, how much outreach did God do before settling with Abraham?
Mm.
Did he meet with other people to say, hey, I want you to do this, but then they did their own thing? Hey, I want you to do this. Well, then they ended up doing their own thing. How often did that happen? That began to be my thought process. Now, how much reaching out did God actually do? Because if that's the case, then it would make sense, and again, why people are believing in these so-called other gods, and they have these stories that are so similar to the gospel but aren't exactly the gospel. That would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, yeah. So I would agree with your principle that
Okay.
humans tell stories, and telling a crap ton of stories, and plus all of the integration and the migrating and the mixing is going
Mm-hmm.
to cause there to be a multitude of similarities between all different kinds of stories. So I think that that is a natural occurrence that is completely inevitable. And I would also say, to add the supernatural element, um, I um, I'm very much influenced by a church. I love church history, and I'm very much influenced by someone named Justin Martyr, who is a early Christian philosopher. And one of his ideas was that the demons were the was that the demons were behind the pagan deities and such that existed, and this
Mm.
is why you could read a pagan mythological text, a story about a pagan deity or something, and
Mm-hmm.
see similarities between Christianity and something else, but ultimately it's completely different. Is that for Justin, uh, demons were giving these mixed messages to these philosophers. And so I don't know exactly what I would agree with him there, but him,
Right.
along with Dr. Michael Heiser, and others,
Okay.
have, I think, pointed out something important, which is that there are supernatural beings that are at work in the world, that have a real existence and significance, and that they do influence people and they do want worship. So for
Oh yeah.
Dr. Michael Heiser, for example, would say that Baal is real. He's just
Mm-hmm.
he has a real supernatural existence
Oh yeah.
and can actually influence people and such. He's Michael Heiser is not polytheistic, because the notion
Mm.
is that there is only one being you're supposed to be worshiping. These are lower supernatural beings that God created, but that fell, and
Mhm.
he would rely on Deuteronomy
Right.
32, Psalm 82, I believe, where the psalm that Jesus quotes, where he looking at the Pharisees and said, "You will be like gods." That kind of, yeah,
Yes.
quoting Psalm 82, I believe, and other things. So
Oh my goodness.
with
Oh
all
my
that said, I
Izzy. 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 You can't run from this, Izzy. 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 Are you on a time schedule, or are we allowed to be a bit
I can
free? Let me know.
go for a while. Yeah, I got a while.
Izzy. Izzy. Izzy, we got Izzy. We're about Izzy. Oh
Listen,
man.
this
Oh
is what I
man.
brought you on.
Look, you you need to listen. You don't need to listen, but you gotta hear me out here. Okay. The part of why he said that about them being gods, right?
Mhm,
That's associated to them being judges.
mhm,
Because they have to judge in the Old Testament. When people were appointed as judges and priests to make decisions like that, they were considered gods because they had to judge between good decisions, good actions, bad actions, etc. They had to judge between good and evil, right? That's what made them gods. But the issue, the thing with that is that it was made evident at the point of the fall that we otherwise aren't actually capable of doing that. Judges have to study and learn and experience different things to be able to make those right type of decisions. And even then, they kind of fail. That's why they have the law to back them up, because otherwise they couldn't do it themselves. But that's why they're called gods, because they're judging between good and evil, which man naturally can't do. What was the thing that that the serpent and God said when it came to Adam and Eve eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? The serpent said, "You will become like God, knowing good and evil." God said they have become like us to know good and evil. They just can't judge it properly.
mhm.
That's why those judges were called gods, because they're put in a position to judge it, though they can't do it properly. So that's why Jesus in that moment even made that association, granted to show himself to be even more because he is God. But at the same time, when it comes to us, quote unquote, being gods, it's being able to judge between good and evil.
Yeah, yeah,
That makes
yeah,
sense?
yeah. I know that there is some debate about what is going on with the passage that we are referring to. Uh,
Oh, I've heard about that
yeah,
too. Yep.
because there are some scholars who will take the more human approach, right? That these are references to judges, uh, and
Mm-hmm.
some of the Christian and Jewish history has said that.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like Dr. Michael Heiser and others would argue that these are divine beings in the original context of
I
Psalm
also agree.
82, right? So either way, though, I think that it is a valid point to say that Jesus is quoting the psalm because whoever the subject was initially of Psalm 82, they have
Mm-hmm.
failed completely. They have failed to
Amen.
do the mission that they were appointed to do, which is likely to judge whether they were divine or human, and to
Mhm.
be over nations and such. And they have failed to do that. Uh,
Now, I hope I'm not smacking when I'm
oh,
chewing candy. Can y'all hear all of that or no?
I'm good. I haven't. It doesn't bother me.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah. So,
I just want to be sure.
oh, fair, fair. Yeah, definitely a lot of interesting stuff there. I wanted to mention something. So we talked about a number of things like LGBTQ characters in media, right? Um, Anime and some other things. Um, there was a video that you made that I thought would be
Mm.
really important to touch on, and that is the Sound of Freedom. And yeah, I wanted uh, I figured
I'm
you
dying
made
to see that movie, man.
huh?
I'm dying to see that movie.
Yeah, I figured you made a video about it and it seems to be getting popular in law of attraction. I heard that this was supposed to come out in 2019, but it, Disney was doing some ridiculous stuff and so it came out recently. Um, which is very, very unfortunate because this movie needs to be seen. So I guess, what do you think about it initially before you watched it? What is it even about? Let our
Well, I haven't
audience know.
seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet. What I did do was I watched the interview between Jordan Peterson and the actor who played the detective and the actual detective. Both of them were present with Jordan
Oh,
Peterson, and they had a conversation about the movie. They had a conversation about their struggles with the movie. Yeah, if you go to Jordan Peterson's page on YouTube, you'll see that they have about an hour-long conversation, and it was a blessing to just sit back and listen to it. And it's the thing is, this isn't a new conversation. It's just a conversation people keep running from.
yeah.
And my biggest thing with this, and it was a hurtful revelation, because I'm not saying that I struggle with that. I don't struggle with being attracted to kids. Like, that's not a thing for
Yeah.
me. That's not something I need God's help with. Thank the Lord. I'm so glad I don't, but there are people that do. And here's why I say this, right? The movie is about identifying people who are trafficking kids for sexual reasons, for drug reasons, for several different types of reasons. There was an event about 2 3 years ago where they found a ring of trafficked people, and the ring of trafficked people were young boys, and the people that were in there doing these things with these kids were US leaders. I can't say like if they're like directly in the government, but they hold power in the US that were over in another country messing with those little boys. That's a thing. That is common. That happens. Now, the part of the reason why this movie didn't get traction, cover up. Absolutely. People don't want you to be aware that the people that you're watching movies for that you like are doing these evil things. The other side to that is, and there's twofold for the other side, is that one, people are aware, but they're still going to go watch their movies. They're still going to listen to their music. They're still going to go buy their albums. They're still going to talk about them on social media, not because they actually don't like what they're doing, but because they know people like to hear it. So they're going to support these people whether or not they are doing these things. That's going to happen unless they officially get arrested. That's it. That's going to happen. The other side to that is that the reason why I think people are freaked out and just like, oh God, we should talk about that. Oh, that's so disgusting. Oh, that freaks me out. Oh. The other reason why I think people do that, and this is going to be a hard one, is because they fear facing that might be an issue for them.
Mm. I think, yeah, I think
Really?
that's a fair point. I mean, and fair enough. Obviously, messing with kids has a social stigma, and some of that, from the historical scholars that I mentioned, inspiring philosophy has quoted them and such. A lot of
Little tiring.
a lot of Christian tradition has tried to do everything it can to resist messing with boys, and that was a huge difference between Christianity and Rome at the time. It's like, no, these are
Mhm.
image bearers. You cannot mess with them like this, right?
Yeah.
So, um, uh, which is why there was debate and attempt to encourage uh, people to wait until a higher age to get married and all these other things, trying to
Mhm.
avoid child marriage in the West, which again is saturated with Christian values and such.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So we definitely have a lot of that, but I've talked to people where they've gotten real honest and been like, I have no idea why we wait until we're 18. Right? Because and this is just what happens in culture and society in general. People take things for
Mhm.
granted. They see themselves in this
Yep.
culture and society and just think, yeah, this is just what happens.
Yep.
And this is why people have culture shock when they go somewhere else. Um, maybe in another culture, a handshake is actually a sign of disrespect. That's weird to
Mhm.
us, but it might be completely
Yep.
normal to them, and they're normal, and they're going to look at us as weird, right? So, but with that said, though, there are people who genuinely have no idea why. This is why, like, I thought it was so important to review this debate. My first live stream on YouTube was reviewing a debate between a inspiring philosophy and Muslim skeptic on whether or not child marriage was moral, and it was one of the most insane debates I've ever seen. It's not the subject matter is, and the
Mhm.
defense of the subject matter was one of the most insane. I wouldn't say that the way that they acted towards each other is what made it insane,
Mhm.
but it was insane. Like he
Right.
literally had to confess, like, yeah, if the girl starts showing signs of maturity, we can marry her at
Mhm.
9, and even earlier, right, following the
Mhm.
example of the great Prophet Muhammad. Um, but
Was that a pun? Was that a pun, Izzy?
it's like,
That was very punny of you. Very, very punny of you to do. That was good.
but it's a huge issue. It's still we
Mhm.
still do this. I mean, did you see the outrage that happened a few years ago with Netflix when Cooties came out?
Oh, dude,
Yeah,
yes, yes. I didn't
like
even touch
this
that.
is still a
Didn't even touch
problem.
it. I was like,
Yeah, we've been fighting Christianity, I would say, and then Western culture has been fighting to try to like help get stop this situation, and it continues. it's still happening. And so, but like I said, so because everyone in the West has kind of taken this for granted, no one realizes that like hundreds of thousands of child marriages still happen in the US.
Hmm.
A lot of things happen. There was a lot of things that debate and debating these Muslims have made me aware of that I didn't know before. And now it's like, okay, our society didn't just arbitrarily decide 18. Like, we
Yeah.
actually have scientific and virtuous reasons as to why we're doing this. We need to let
What are some of them? What are some of them? If you don't
Yeah.
mind
So
telling me
so
about it, so I can get
a
my own.
lot of the scientific reasons come down to we need to let these children develop, because if they don't, then, a bunch of issues will happen. So it's the harm, it's the physical harm that this can cause, and it also
Hmm.
might relate to sociology too. We see that, a much older man marrying a younger girl is gonna cause power dynamics. Man is gonna have
Yep.
power in that relationship, and there is nothing she
Mm.
can do to check him. So he basically has
True.
unrestrained power. And
Hmm.
that is can very easily become extremely dangerous. We know from the studies that the rate of domestic violence is high in child marriages,
Hmm.
much more than regular marriages. Um, the Obviously we need to, not to be crude again, but this is just the reality. We have to wait for women's bodies to develop properly, because having children at
Hmm.
14 and 15 is going to destroy, um, can very much destroy their psyche. I mean, they're completely incapable of parenting at that age,
Right.
among a crap ton of other things. But the rate of STDs and things like that can increase. Their hips aren't widened such that they could,
Hmm.
produce a child, so that causes problems. So it's like, so with all of these issues at play, if we're going to love God, and this is the argument that inspiring philosophy has for the Christian, based upon
Yeah.
his understanding of virtue ethics. If we're going where the goal of life is to be someone of excellent character and virtue, if we're
Hmm.
going to love God and we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, then how do we do that in the world? And it seems obvious from the literature, from the science and such, and really just practical things. Like, obviously, a 15-year-old can't parent, right? Obviously, there are power
Right.
dynamics in this relationship that can be easily exploited.
Hmm.
Um, Various other things. Uh, it is not loving to do this. So
Okay.
we have to change it. And so inspiring philosophy did a lot of work to kind of fight against Islam on that issue, which is why he debated Daniel in part. Other than the fact that Daniel, the
Yes.
Muslim,
Yes.
was the one that decided to challenge him, which is insane.
He embarrassed himself on that
Oh
one.
my goodness, it
Now,
was so embarrassing.
now,
So, but yeah,
the
so
things
but
I
basically,
would add to that.
it's
Yeah.
not arbitrary. 18 is when,
Mhm.
puberty finishes, where we reach a stage of development where we can, um, make better choices. Our bodies are more developed, right? So it's not arbitrary. It's legitimately backed by science and such. So.
So I was giving that some thought. One, as you were speaking, and two, as you brought the topic up, is one of the things that I was thinking about. I often think about the difference between dispensation. And one of the things that I realized was there's two key. I always do this. I'll be like, there's two things about this. This I always talk like that. I don't know
Mm,
why, but a part of the dispensation biblically, one is health. Health contributes to your development.
mhm,
So some studies have shown that you develop faster when you are, for those that are either middle class or lower. You develop a lot faster than those who are wealthy and rich. That's why they look more fatigued or a bad, physique and things of that nature, or even fat. Uh, you know, the poorer you are, the more you develop. That was an interesting, concept that was introduced to me. But what I mean by that is, back then they ate a lot more fruit, they ate a lot more healthy meat, they didn't have a lot of chemicals being added to what they had. They barely drank alcohol because they were only drinking it for ceremonial reasons, and they really just took in water. So their bodies were being given the things originally that God intended for them to have. So their bodies developed differently back then. That's one factor to that. Not only that, back then the focus was we're going to really immediately train up our young men to be able to establish a family, to be able to manage in the fields, to be able to take care of a household, to have servants, or to be a servant. They were already being trained up at an early age for those things. Young women were being trained up to be wives, to care for their husbands, to care for their household, to raise children. That was cut out a while, like a couple hundred years ago.
In part in the
That
West,
wasn't a part of society.
in part because of, I mean, this isn't the entire reason. Again, there were
Right,
people
true,
in the
true, true.
Middle Ages who were like, "Yeah, you're not gonna marry my daughter until she's older." For example,
Interesting.
yeah. I would check out that debate. Inspiring Philosophy lays out
Mhm.
a lot of good stuff, a lot of good quotes.
So,
But
what was the medieval reason?
it was basically the same. They recognized that there were problems arising from marrying really young, so they wanted to wait
Mhm.
until they were older. Uh, so
Right.
not everyone obviously did that, but
Mhm.
like health experts at the time even were making those kinds of statements.
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah. So, but uh, it's
So why do you think God allowed it for Israel?
um
I'm not saying 9, 10, and 11 years old. No, I'm talking like 14, 15, maybe up to 16. Why do you think it was permissible in Israel?
so I don't know if it actually was or not. Um, it's possible that that kind of thing was allowed. I don't believe that the Mosaic, I I don't believe that the Mosaic Law or the Old Covenant generally was perfect
Mhm.
and perfected anything. So yeah, so I'm
Mm,
okay. So I'm perfectly fine with
that's a conversation right
yeah,
there.
yeah. So if they have a
Ooh.
cultural,
Okay.
because age is not mentioned in the Mosaic Law, right? So if they have a
Mhm.
cultural thing that God decides not to fix, then
Mhm.
that doesn't bother me because I'm working on this argument because I want to deal with the passages and slavery related to the Old Testament.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
God is trying to progress Israel. So I
Mhm.
think that if the old covenant had worked, then Israel would get to a point where that never happened. But also, I'm not entirely convinced that it did all the time. We see, for example, Inspiring Philosophy points this out, but when uh, uh, I believe it's in Ezekiel when Israel is being when the relationship between God and Israel is being described, we're told that God waited for Israel to be fully developed and even more time passed. And that was described as the perfect time for God to be in union with Israel, who is the wife. And so, um, based upon that, uh, some Jews even in their later traditions inferred, as well as scholars today infer that uh, even then it was recognized that we could wait longer and it would be more
Interesting.
beneficial. It would be a perfect time. They would be ripe for marriage,
Okay.
and things like that. If you see, for example, like even how
Yeah.
Solomon describes his wife, this sounds like a developed woman, right? This does not
Interesting.
sound like a child. Uh,
So it's really kind of catering to the maturity of the maturity of that dispensation, because they were really just starting out
yeah,
um as a um an early nation.
yeah, and
So for there to be that
coming out of
yeah,
400 years of Egyptian slavery, right?
that
Yeah.
makes sense. That's
Yeah, it would
interesting.
it
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it would be extremely hard. I mean, it's hard for us to listen to God now when we go through
Mhm.
3 years of something, and fair enough, right? Because those 3 years are suffering and it's hard. But the entire
Yeah.
group went through 400 years of oppression by a pagan nation, right? So it
Mhm.
it makes sense that they are hard-hearted and things like that, and it's like, yeah, God did all these amazing things for us, but it's like also he let us go through that. So, among other things. So they are Israel is a product of their time, and God is trying to use this product of the time in order to demonstrate His wisdom and various other things. So how does He do that? Well, He doesn't change everything about them immediately. So you might think that. today, just as an example, today, uh, the U.S. would be really dumb if they went to the Muslim majority countries and said, "Hey, stop marrying children." um,
Oh yeah.
or to use a
Mhm.
different example, um, hey, give women full and equal rights. Like obviously
Mhm.
they're gonna say no, but
That would start a
yeah,
war.
but if the United States say, hey, at least let them drive for a little while. Right. And then we say, okay, now they're driving, but now we have these situations where they might need to drive alone. So how about we let them drive alone for a little bit? And so
Easy.
we can keep progressing. You
Mhm.
might say that this is also sometimes what happens in therapy with addicts. They might not tell you to stop cold turkey. They might tell you to find a
Mhm.
supplement, find something to replace it. Um, let's wean you off is the term, right? So I think that
Mhm.
there are just times where you need to stop what you're doing immediately, and there are times where you're gonna have to take it slow. And so I think that God is attempting to progressively sanctify Israel, essentially. Uh,
So can we talk about that from a Christian point of view? And what I mean by looking at it from a Christian point of view is this: one of the main things we aim to do is to lead people to Christ, right? Certain groups think that the Holy Ghost transforms you immediately, you're immediately saved, you stop all the evil stuff that you're doing, you're now saved. But then there's the other aspect to that too, and that can also go two ways, where it's going to take you time to stop doing the sick, perverse, and inappropriate things that you used to do and walk in the way that the Lord wants you to walk. Some people believe that they're still saved even though they're going through that process. Others believe that they're not saved till the process is done. So what do you believe on that?
I'm I'm someone who thinks that God will. I very much stress like accommodation, like divine accommodation. Um,
Okay.
I mean, it's a really simple idea. Basically, God accommodates our needs. So,
Hmm.
the very fact that people hear God in the English language is itself a divine accommodation because language didn't exist before. But God wants to have a relationship with those who do speak English.
Right.
So He accommodates us by speaking our language. So, um, so that yeah,
Nice.
so that would be a form of accommodation. So, God understanding psychology, our environment, and all these other things much more than anyone else could possibly ever understand, is going
Hmm.
to be willing to work with the human if the human will work with him. Um, my
Interesting.
my my professor here, Dr. Philip Long, when we were going over some of the Pauline literature, he noted that for Paul, Christians are meant to choose to um, be in communion with God. We choose to work with God in some way. We
Hmm.
participate in His plan, and we willingly choose to participate, and that is the process of sanctification. We are being transformed by participating in the work and plan that God has for us, and the will that He has for us. And I would equally just as say that we can choose to leave God and reject the plan that He has for us. So this thought process has uh, typically caused me to resist um, the concept of once saved, always saved. It has opened me up to the possibility of post mortem salvation, because it would be really weird to have people in hell who would be like, "Okay, I'm done. I repent. Please get me out of here. I want to be
Hmm.
with you now. I realize what I've done wrong." And then God would be like, you know. So so
Hmm.
if you're willing to participate with God, God will participate with you, and He will accommodate your needs and desires and wants. And so with all that said, this is also really important because, we're going back just real quick to the LGBTQ community, just as an example, you're going to have Christians who are still same-sex attracted because they are products
Same
of
sex attracted.
we are
Yeah.
products of a combination of genetics and environment. And those two
Hmm.
things can cause someone to be homosexual, same-sex attracted, and that is,
Hmm.
or someone could have gender dysphoria, And so God, who understands
Mhm.
us much better than anyone else, is going to be able to make the right decision as to whether or not, like my friend Jude R. Young, who works in my online ministry, transforms him such that he's no longer same-sex attracted, or he's
Mhm.
going to work with, or he's going to choose, for example, this kind of situation that you have with Samuel on TikTok and Gay Christian Answers on TikTok, who are theologically conservative but also same-sex attracted, and God still works with them just the same.
Right. Well, the key with that is, and the reason I think I know who you're talking about. There's two gentlemen who I've tuned into who are same sex attracted but don't give into the behavior. It's that discipline, and I think, and that's one of the things I want to give them kudos for,
Yeah,
is disciplining
I can't
themselves
imagine.
from that, because you can't stay away from
Yeah,
them. Same sex, you just can't. You're going to be exposed to them unless you become a hermit. And if you're really wanting to walk out what God's called us to, you're going to have to be out amongst them.
yeah,
And so to believe in the power of the blood of Jesus to not just simply take it away at all times, but in some instances allow you to endure that thorn in your side to remind you that you are still carnal. See, Pete, when it comes to the thorn in the side, it wasn't about Paul sinning. It
it's
was
about his
really just
character.
making. Yes, about his
Yeah,
character, making sure you don't lose sight of the fact that you're a human being. Don't lose sight that you're just as fallen or capable of falling like they are. And so to experience that is to keep that reminder in you at all times. So it keeps you from being puffed up. And I really respect people who go through that, but they maintain that discipline.
absolutely.
I love and I respect them for that. Because then they're not even playing that game of, well, since I can't have a man, I'll go be with a woman, get them
Yeah,
pregnant, and then have kids, but they're still wanting another guy. Like, that lie, playing off of
it
that lie
only
is
hurts you
very,
and
very
others.
sick.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of
Agreed.
the and so just to touch on this since we're here, this is part of the misunderstanding between LGBTQ people and Christians. Christians have
Mm,
a combination of um, different ethical systems. One of them being deontology, basically God commands, and the other
mhm,
one being virtue ethics, which is the idea that our highest moral, um, our highest goal to be achieved is to be a virtuous and excellent character. That's what the Thorn in the Side was
mhm,
about. We need to be excellent characters. So, what's really important about virtue ethics is that in virtue ethics, you're going to need to suffer. It's
yeah,
it's not a matter of will you or should you, it's a matter of you need to, because suffering
mm,
is what produces character.
mhm,
Suffering is what produces good, and if you're going to attain virtue, you're going to have
mhm,
to suffer in order to get out on the other side. And this is, I think, this is recognized in pop culture today. How many times have our superheroes suffered so that in the service of a greater good or a greater ideal? How many times has, I mean, I played Spider-Man Edge of Time. Spider-Man Spider-Man dies in that game to protect the world from anti-venom and to try to help him. He literally
mm.
dies to himself in the service of a greater good. And that is virtue ethics,
Wow.
I think, and that is the Christian life. And I think that LGBTQ people will often misunderstand that because they see it as extremely sad that that this
Mhm,
person wants to do something that's okay, and then they've convinced themselves that it's not okay and that they shouldn't do it. But that kind of
mhm,
suffering, the holding off of your desires in the service of a greater good, whether that's the good of others, the good of yourself, or the good of your future self even. Uh, how many times
mhm.
are highly motivated people will choose not to get off their diet so that they can get the body that they want or the job or the business that they want, right?
Right.
Sacrificing your time to wake up at 6 in the morning to go do something, right?
You're making me feel bad for eating this
I
candy right
Bro,
now.
listen, I got Pop Tart right here. It's fine. I got you're good. You're good.
Oh goodness. No, I totally agree with you. And I kind of wanted to, to kind of bring in the nerd part now too, is when you bringing up Spider-Man, right? For the earlier years, they hadn't considered human relations or character, like human experience when it came to heroism. And so because comic books started to have a fall off, they then began to consider, hey, well, maybe we need to introduce these type of experiences or that type of experience. That's what got Stan Lee and Jake Kirby to make the character of Spider-Man in the first place, was to humanize a
Yeah.
hero. That's what made them make him. And at the same time, that just to take that a step further, even when we look at what comic books went through when it came to writing these immaculate stories, and this again, it just really associates back to how everything really just ties back to the true and living God. They had to go as far as introducing or making gods.
Mm.
But not only making gods, they had to make gods that made the universe. Then they had to make gods that had a role or a part in creating the multiverse. Then they had to make the god that's above the gods of the multiverse to be the one above all. So
It
they
is.
had to make a divine supernatural system to make comic books more attractive, make comic books more interesting. So what they've revealed, though the audience may not say that, is that you need religion, you need God, you need something supernatural or divine to have a rule over the natural function of humanity. Otherwise, you will lose interest even in your very life. So that's one of the powerful things about actually having those concepts in there, and even more so, like with us bringing that up, having that representation in there, because we're then responsible for illustrating real life. I love the Bible not because it simply tells a love story. I love the Bible because it'll tell you about other nations and how they behaved. It'll tell you about how some people came from one nation and came back in to follow the people of God. They'll tell you about the fall and the misbehaviors of those same people that claim to follow God. Have you read Judges 19?
Oh God. Uh, yeah.
Judges 19 is one of the sickest. I mean, granted, I've read a lot of the Bible, man. I'm telling you. But when you sit back and you read Judges 19, man's wife whores around. So to not get killed by a husband or get in trouble with her husband, she runs back home. Husband goes, well, concubine, let me specify, it's not a wife but concubine, this the specific language. He goes to get his concubine, they go to leave. These are Israelites. They go to this town on Israelite land to house up until they can get home. This old man takes them in. Some men from this town, Israelites, show up at their door and said, hey, that guy you got in there, we want to know him. We want to know him. And get what
Yeah.
they do. The same thing Lot did in Sodom and Gomorrah. He said, please take our daughters. Take his wife. Don't take him. They said, nah, we want him. What does he do? He kicks his concubine out to go be with those men. And they take advantage of her all night long. She comes home, falls over unalived, and then the husband takes her and cuts her up into 12 pieces and sends it to the other tribes to make those other men get in trouble. But I'm like, you're not gonna act like, though, man, you didn't send her out there. You're not gonna act like you didn't just cut your wife up.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's in the
It's
Bible.
insane. Yeah, the Bible definitely does not shy away from telling you the horrible things that people have
Mm-mm.
done. I know that some unbelievers, for example, will complain about the fact that Lot was trying to give his daughters to the people at Sodom and Gomorrah, and then later on in the
Yeah.
Bible, he's called a righteous man.
Mm-hmm.
But again, righteous people do evil all over the text. That's part of the point. Is that none of
Mm-hmm.
these people are the perfect moral pattern of conduct for us to follow. There's
Yes.
certainly wisdom in how some of them interact with things, but they are not perfect in any way, um, and that certainly causes, um, and that is certainly pointed out in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, the same, and it's weird too because the same guy who wanted to give his daughters to the men so that they didn't um, do that to do that to the angels. His
Mm-hmm.
daughters then turn around later on and get him drunk and sleep with him.
Mm-hmm.
That would
Mm-hmm.
count today as rape, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's it very much does not shy away from that. But so these people are trying to be virtuous and they fail, And then we have the example
Mhm.
of Jesus, who becomes the best virtuous person that
Mhm.
has ever lived. And so we begin to emulate him. That's part of the cool thing about Christian virtue
Mhm.
ethics, is that our virtues, the righteousness that we're supposed to emulate, is grounded
Right.
in the being or ontology of God and the righteousness of the life of Jesus.
So let me ask you this question. Why do you think Lot was trying to send his daughters out instead?
So there are two possible reasons that I have in mind.
Okay.
The one was just that, I mean, he just panicked. Like, this is a
Okay.
like, we there are all kinds of villain quotes, like, from the Joker and other things, where they'll basically say something like, "You don't know who you are until you're in a horrifying situation."
All it takes is one bad
Right,
day.
right, right. That horrifying how you are in that horrifying situation is how you really are. And
Mhm.
and so I think that, but at the same time, is it fair to judge our character over a horrific situation that happens on us suddenly and traumatically, in which we are put into the fight or flight response and aren't able to think critically?
Mhm.
And so
Right.
Lot simply just wasn't. So one option is just that Lot just wasn't thinking critically, but also he didn't know what else he could possibly do. And in a more
Okay.
patriarchal culture at the time, um, that just might have been his thought process. We don't need to think he's right, of course. On the other hand,
Right.
relating to culture, um, there is a very interesting argument. And so Dr. Dan McCullen has mentioned this on TikTok, and other scholars have mentioned this, but the argument would basically go like this: the reason why homosexuality would be a sin is not because
Mhm.
of the act itself, or just because God commands it,
Mhm.
or because He respects the sanctity of marriage. The reason is because of socially conventioned, or socially engineered systems of hierarchy. In the argument goes, in the ancient world, um, sex, right, as a thing, was
Mhm.
not something that was done in loving consensual manners in which both parties would enjoy each other. The notion
Mhm.
was that sex was a representation of the social hierarchy. So men
Okay.
naturally would, as we see in these cultures, would be at the top of that hierarchy. So for so the man then would represent this in sex by being in the dominant position, and then women, of course, in a patriarchal society, would be in the submissive position.
Okay.
This is fine, but what happens when the role is reversed? And this is something that you see in, for example, this Jewish legend, where Lilith does not want to be on bottom. Uh, the concept is that Lilith is Adam's first wife, not Eve. It's a whole thing. Point is,
Mhm.
she
Yeah.
leaves the garden because she doesn't want to be on the bottom, as how it's supposed to be. She wants to be on
Mm.
top. She wants to be over him. This is a problem, according to the story. So, so the argument then is that homosexuality then disrupts this socially convention hierarchy. Why is a man submitting? Why is he taking the passive role and not the dominant role? You're a man,
Okay.
right? So
Mhm.
if this is true, and this is the underlying rationale, then that changes the way that we look at Sodom and Gomorrah, because now these are men who are not only being inhospitable and terrible to other men, but are also
Mhm.
trying to put a other men in the submissive position,
Mhm.
disrupting and creating a dysfunctional system in order to embarrass him, right?
Right.
And
Right.
we actually have remnants of this concept in our culture today. It's kind of a
Mm.
meme or a joke, but it really does happen. Um, Prison. This is
Yep.
right. This is also what happens.
Happens.
They do this to other men to embarrass them and debase them, and to
Mhm.
even make them submit to the hierarchy that's in the prison. Um,
Buck.
I will demonstrate my dominance over you by doing this. And so, now, if this is the case, then that is what is going on in Sodom. And so Lot might, again, we can't psychoanalyze characters that we've never even looked at, let alone, you know what I mean? But if this is the case, then his thought process might have been, okay, at least let it be daughters, women.
Mhm.
That way, this hierarchy, this socially
Right.
conventional hierarchy is not upset, and
Right.
and at least the women won't be embarrassed. Maybe is the idea, which is weird, obviously in and of itself, because the women should naturally feel embarrassed either way because they're just being used and
Right.
not being respected, whatever. But that might have been how it was understood at the time. So
Yeah. Well, to add to that, like I think I lean more towards with the second one. Um, Somewhat different because I never looked at it from that hierarchical perspective. But if we were to take that route, the unity between the two should lead to the production of life, which would lead to the production of life that would then contribute back to the community or
mhm.
back to that nation or back to that society. And two people of the same can't produce that.
That
So
that would have been
technically,
another thing too, right? You can't.
yeah, other than
They
other than your
at the time might
servants.
have thought you can't be fruitful and multiply with this is an
Correct.
issue. So they might have thought that too at the time.
Right. But like the thing with that too, like, and it really is hard to just be said the way that I'm about to say it, but it's also true. We know that the scriptures say that if you have a lack of self-control sexually, what should you do? Get married. Now, should someone who lacks sexual self-control genuinely be out here getting married? No. But at least you're married and doing it versus doing it with someone you're not married to.
Yeah.
So these men who lack self-control, should we really just be exposing our women or even men for that matter to them? Absolutely not. But at least the intimacy between them would fall in line with God's design and wouldn't contradict that.
Yeah.
And so that's where exposing the women, though again, that's not good. It's at least that would be right in God's eyes, where everything else is just another sin to rack up your death count.
Mm.
And so it's really hard to think of it that way, but it's also true. It's better you just get married than be out there having sex with whoever you want to. It's better it's women than it be with men, because at least you're not committing that sin against God. And so that's kind of how I also look at it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very fair. So, yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up Judges 19, because Judges 19 is a similar situation where, again, if this convention hierarchy is true, these men are trying to shame, debase, and harm the other man,
Mm-hmm.
which would be embarrassing for uh, whoever is taking the submissive role in that
Mm-hmm.
interaction. So there's definitely a lot there. I'm not entirely convinced that this is the reason behind that this is the rationale behind homosexuality being a sin in the text. Because this is
Okay.
actually a really interesting argument. I think this is probably the best argument for a more pro LGBTQ position, is that the Bible has this underlying rationale as to why it's having these commands, but that underlying
Mm-hmm.
rationale is completely irrelevant today. No one is accepting this rationale that is embedded into the underlying command that we find in the biblical text. So if we're not holding to the rationale, why are we holding to the command that produced the rationale?
True.
That is a
True.
really good hermeneutical point to make. I'm
Mhm.
not convinced that that's the only issue. I think
Right. I agree with
I think yeah, I think that um, for Paul, again, for example, Romans 1, I in the video I quote that I talked about this. I quoted a affirming Christian who he just does not believe that the Bible is inerrant. So he does believe
that.
that
Hmm.
these people can make theological mistakes, but even he would. So he thinks that it's a mistake for Paul to conclude this. But he agrees, like, the best understanding of Paul in Romans 1 is that the reason why homosexual acts are being condemned of both men and women, actually the only passage where women are at all mentioned in this. which is
Mm-hmm.
which
Yep.
these scholars would argue is supporting evidence for this issue debasing the man, not the woman.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, the best argument is the created order interpretation because of some things, but basically Josephus and Philo would have thought in similar fashions, that we can look back to the created order to see how things should be and
Mm-hmm.
then make conclusions based off of that. And that makes sense. And that concept, that tradition is in Christianity too. This is literally what
Mm-hmm.
Jesus says in Matthew 19. Uh, Moses gave
Right.
the law of divorce because of the hardness of heart, which is also evidence that the Mosaic law was not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, but from the beginning it was not so. And so uh, so it's the case that we can go back to the created order to find out how things really should be, even if
Mm-hmm.
it subverts the Mosaic law. And so I think that for the Jews of the first century, as this affirming Christian I think demonstrates, uh,
Mm-hmm.
they would have seen homosexuality as going against created order.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, then going against wisdom, because it was also thought that wisdom is found in how God made things. I mean, that's the Proverbs, right? Over and over
Mm-hmm.
again, it associates wisdom with how God made things and what God has made.
Right.
So, and other Jewish literature does that too. So I think that's the better argument there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I do want to give I I think that Christians will very often think that the interpretations that disagree with them are completely lacking in the biblical data. And while
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's true, I think that a lot of people um, can often underestimate um, how good an interpretation they disagree with is. And so kudos to the scholars and affirming Christians there, arguing that
Mm-hmm.
if we're not going to follow the underlying rationale anymore, then why follow the principle that created it is a great argument. In terms
Okay.
of biblical interpretation, I just don't think that this underlying
Okay.
rationale is the main driving force behind Paul's, for example's, maybe the Old Testament's. Fair, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's Paul's rationale there. So,
So how progressive then do you think the church should be?
ooh, that's a question. Um, I think that so if we're going to demonstrate the very virtue, because that's what we're supposed to do as Christians, right? Be Christ-like, right?
Mm-hmm.
God has these virtues that are grounded in his very being. They are objective and real, and they're grounded in his existence. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so when God saves us, he imbues us with the commands, at least, to live out the same virtues that he embodies. So we
Mm-hmm.
become the embodiment of divine virtue. And so at least we should, right? So if we're going to do that, then I think that a lot of progress can be made. We can help
Okay.
the sex trafficking scene, right?
Okay.
Let's
Agreed.
stop people who are made in the image of God from being abused like this. We
Mm-hmm.
could have ended slavery a lot sooner than what the church did, admittedly, because of this. Um,
Yes.
granted, there's a lot that we got to do with the Old New Testament in that regard, but um, we could have ended it a lot sooner than what we did. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
um, a bunch of different things. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a political person, and so I don't think I'm a reliable commenter on anything related to politics. But
Right.
if you are a Christian that's going to get into politics, then you do have to think about how we should not be a theocracy, but also demonstrate divine attributes in our policies. If you want to go
Okay.
down that road, like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, right? Um, all those sorts of
Right.
things. So does that mean that we give health care to everyone? Because to love them is to take care of them, right? Um, how
Right.
do we take care of the poor, the widow, and the fatherless, like the prophets
Mhm.
of the Old Testament repeatedly tell us to do,
Right.
right?
So let me speak to that. So the one thing I want to say to that is that when it comes to the body of Christ, how are we treating or conducting ourselves with someone that may come into our church that is of that community? Like what is our treatment? What is our regulation of treatment? Because it can't simply be, well, you need to stop that. You need to stop. That's not counsel. That's
Yeah.
not support in the biblical way. And that's not showing them who Christ is simply by telling them to stop doing something. You have to show them something to strive towards, which in this dispensation, I believe is showing them what love is. I think that's the best way to actually combat that. But in what you are saying with, how are we supporting the poor, how are we supporting our those people that are being divorced, and us doing that through policy and things of that nature. What really comes back to me is, I don't think that, and me and my dad kind of butt heads on this, because we had this discussion back and forth. I think we should be a lot more about our support of them, not support of them and their behavior, but how are we supporting those families versus, man, we really need some policies in place.
Mm.
Because let's say we get a policy passed that stops same-sex marriage. Okay, what then? Because one, you're an advocate, and two, the people that push for the policy, you think they're going to be out and about looking for a church to go to? Absolutely not.
Right.
They're going to be looking for places where they're accepted. Now, it's easy for us to say, well, they made their decision, but we never even planted a seed to determine if they actually made a decision. We really just put a law that expanded what that barrier looked like. And here's why I'm saying this. I'm saying this because I keep losing it. Like, I have it and then I lose it. But like, the reason why I'm saying this is because the reason why, one, and this is just me, they go down that road of wanting that in the first place is because they saw the church, and in the early church, at least in the western side of things, they saw the early church professing, stay faithful to your spouse. But then when the kids were at home, they saw adultery or they saw same-sex behavior. And then when they're going back to church on Sunday, they watched
Hmm.
that. So then they're like, oh, you're keeping this secret, but you want to act like you're holy. People were seeing that being a normalized thing. So then when we see them push for that to be law, to be acceptable, it's like, well, why are you getting mad at us for pushing for something you've been doing in the dark this whole time anyway? That don't make
It's
sense.
it's a
So
very rhetorically convincing argument. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I have a series on Satanism. Um, I know this completely sounds random, but I'm getting somewhere with this. Um, but for that series, I've been reading the Satanic Bible and reviewing it and stuff.
woo,
So I did the introduction, which was written by a guy named Burton Wolfe, and he interviewed Anton LaVey. But one of the things that Anton LaVey, being the creator of Satanism, maybe it's a debate in the community. I'm not a Satanist. I don't need to care. Uh, but but he created the Satanic Bible, and Burton quotes Anton LaVey as basically saying that he came to the conclusion that no white light religion could stave off man's carnal and true nature. And he came to this
mhm,
conclusion because he watched the hypocrites in the church. I'm pretty sure he mentions that he played music for the church and also worked at a circus and or a carnival, and he
mm,
watched um, these same people who were there on Saturday doing ridiculous things also be there on Sunday. And so, like,
mhm,
if uh, obviously all this is producing is hypocrites, so
right,
why even engage in this white light religion anymore? And
mhm,
so his philosophy is, he's an atheist, so he doesn't believe in
mm,
God or the devil or anything like that. But his philosophy is a very raw and
mm,
blunt kind of philosophy, where you and sort of hedonistic, where you say, um, you want to do these carnal things, let's do them. like just let's do them. Why are we staving ourselves off like this, being hypocrites? Why are we trying to convince ourselves of fantasies to make us feel better about ourselves when they're not true?
Mhm.
And all these various things. So um as long as we have vague moral guidelines, like obviously consent and other things, let's engage in this sexual activity and do all these other things.
Mhm.
The church is not stopping them. So obviously
Right?
they probably aren't meant to be stopped. So and
Mm.
so it's a very blunt philosophy. I kind of find it to be I mean obviously it's very blunt and raw, but I also find it to kind of be uh simplistic, because
Yeah.
on the one hand, Christians have never guaranteed that they're going to be perfect in this life. I mean, even the
Mhm.
only Christians who maybe believe in sinless perfection are Methodists and Wesleyans, and that's like it. So the vast majority of us are like, yeah, we're not going to be perfect here. We know that.
Well, see, that gets into this though, because I said this a long time ago. Something that moved my faith forward was God exists, whether I believe in Him or not.
Jeez. Yeah.
Right? Think about it like this: what you were just saying. Well, let's just let people do what they want to do. Well, I forget the Satanist quote. It's do what thou wilt.
Yeah. That's from Aleister Crowley. Do what thou wilt. Yeah.
Hmm. So if enough of us as humanity, so the only reason we're not out here, you know, graping and taking advantage of people, hurting people and killing people so free willy nilly is because all of us agree that that's just wrong,
Mm.
right? But if enough of us agreed that it was okay,
Yeah, that's what,
the law changed,
so
right?
Sam Harris, a very popular
Hmm.
atheist, he wrote his book, trying to give an account for morality from an atheistic perspective, and I think he has an admission in there where, like, yeah, we agree, that the psychopath is the minority, uh, and that
Hmm.
these actions are wrong, but if they were to become the majority in a society, then that would be deemed as okay and good.
Absolutely.
Not well, I guess I should,
Hmm.
because I understand enough about psychology to kinda catch myself here. Not that being psychopathic will automatically lead to, like, murderous intent. That's not what a psychopath is, psychologically speaking. What I mean is that, if the majority of people in the society become to agree on something, then that thing will become good.
Hmm.
Uh, I wish I remembered the quote, but it was read. I think it was mentioned in the discussion between, uh, Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and I
Oh, I love that. I watched all what, four of
yeah,
them. I watched them like
yeah.
once a month. I watch all those
Yeah,
videos.
and then, there's a Christian YouTube channel, which I would encourage you guys to check out, called Wise Disciple, and he did a review of one of their discussions, and he quoted, Sam Harris's book in there, so I'm getting that from him. Definitely check that out. I mean, check out Sam Harris's book too, I mean, we need to obviously be able to understand, the people that we disagree with, right? So
Yeah, but what that does still speak to is even if we got to that point, it doesn't change the fact that God says that those things are wrong.
right, so the
That yeah.
majority of philosophers, whether they're atheists or not, are moral realists, which just means we believe objective moral values and duties are real and
Hmm.
again objective. So they are real and true regardless of who contradicts them, or how long they're contradicted, or
Hmm.
or the mass scale in which they are contradicted. So and I would say I mean obviously we're Christians, so we're more realists. um,
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
but uh, there are atheists who are moral realists, because they recognize this, and like I said, I find moral realism to be particularly disgusting. Not moral realism, moral subjectivism. Excuse me, subjectivism and relativism.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that was demonstrated very well in the debate between Dr. James White and David Silverman. And I clipped this portion of the debate and posted it on my socials. But basically, James White asked, if you were standing at the gates of Auschwitz, all you could say is, "For me, this is bad." And David was like, "Yep."
Yeah.
And I
What?
refuse to bite that bullet. I see that other people have, but I refuse. There is
Mm.
no way, and it's not intuitive, and I would argue it's not intuitive to us as human beings to think that um, trafficking, as we've mentioned, or many of these other things, are just the mere behaviors of people that we are allowed to disagree with, but cannot conclusively decide whether these behaviors are good or bad. Or a slightly
Right.
different view, we assign meaning to behavior, but it is just behavior.
Mm.
I can't see myself ever going down that road. It seems to strike at the core when you give a poor man food and water and clothing and all these sort of things, and you help him get on his feet, and then he becomes a businessman, and then you become the poor beggar on the street, and then he tells you to screw off.
Wow.
It seems to
Wow.
strike at the core of something, and that
Mhm.
intuitiveness and intrinsicness, I think, among other reasons, obviously, from a Christian and even philosophical point, is grounds for objective morality.
So could we really be like Paul and know how to be abased and know how to be abound?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's I mean, yeah, with the work of the spirit, sure. Quick point, no, we're not on Zoom. We are on Restream. I like Restream more than Zoom or Google Meet or anything. I don't know about you. I don't know what software, just random side tangent. I don't know what you use for your streaming or anything like that too.
I use OBS Studios. I'll either record on my phone for TikTok and to do my videos to edit. I use Power Director to edit my videos that I record on my phone so that I can, of course, post to YouTube. But my lives, mainly for YouTube, are all done on here. What is that on my face?
Oh, that's
That's so
what
weird.
is that?
That string. I don't
That's
know
so
how that.
random.
What in the world is on my face? No, but yeah, I use OBS Studios. But I might start using Restream since it'll let me go live on all platforms.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
I might start using
Yep,
that.
you can go live on your platforms. It'll be record if you like pay for the upgraded version, it'll be recorded so that you can
Mhm.
post it elsewhere. Um yeah, stuff like that. So it's yeah, it's pretty
Well,
cool.
thankfully YouTube will let me download it. So I don't need to pay money.
Right. Right.
My loopholes.
One of my friends is coming around and wants to hang out. So I will we definitely need to do we should plan for this. I want to review the Little Light Studios videos with you.
I'd be down for
Yeah,
that,
I would
man.
love to do a live stream doing that. I mean, I have a not to get too much into it because I do have to wrap things up soon, but we do. I think that I have a series called Christians Stop Being Goofy, where
Oh.
I do respond to Christians and what I think to be their goofiness. So anything
Mhm.
from mundane as like, y'all really out here saying God isn't real and you hate him. Like, we're both nerds here.
Aw.
Obviously, we know you can hate a concept that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
But
Exactly.
anything from that all the way up to like, um, Doja Cat is engaging in demonic evil because she has a red dress on and red paint all over her skin, and she kinda looks like a
Mhm.
sparkling fallen angel instead of a, I don't know, strawberry or literally anything else. Uh,
Strawberry shortcake.
seriously, like, look at the dress. It's like, you could
That's doing too
yeah.
much. I can't do
Yeah,
it.
definitely. But so because I recognize that the way that Christians exist in the world and the arguments that they present is a reflection can be very
Mhm.
much a reflection upon God. We're supposed to,
Oh yeah.
the saying, and this has been pointed out by Dr. Carmen Imes, Michael Heiser, and others. But the phrase "Do not take the Lord's name in vain" has nothing to do with cussing. It has
Mm,
to do with the fact that Israel was the bearers of God's name to the other nations, and so to
yes.
take it up, but but to do it meaninglessly and to drag his reputation through the mud
Hmm.
is disrespectful towards God and reflects poorly upon Israel in their basically evangelistic efforts. And the
Right.
same goes for the church. Not saying that the church is Israel or whatever,
Hmm.
obviously, but uh, we do bear the name of Christ, and we have to be careful how we do that. And so, having terrible arguments or bad conversations reflect poorly on that. And so, the Stop Being Goofy series is a recognition of that.
Hmm.
So I can like I said, I can respond to anything from, "Hey, this isn't really a good argument. Let me explain why." All the way up
Right.
until, "No, you saying that someone's only gay because of a demon is actually terrible." Uh,
That's horrible. Like that new song that
yeah,
came out that everyone
you've
was just losing it over. I'm like, you can't make such a blanket statement and then hype it. And then the crazy part is some of the people that I saw hyping the song up were people that constantly make videos like disagreeing with deliverance ministries. So it's just like, do you think they have a demon?
Yeah,
Oh, you don't think they
I
have a
can't.
demon?
I I
What?
don't fully agree with, the side that I'm referring to when I say this. I would definitely
Mhm.
agree that terms like pagan, sinner, demon, demonic, etc., heretic, anathema, blasphemy, all those sorts of terms that we all would say are legitimate terms that we can deploy, have been deployed extremely recklessly at times in the history of the church. Where, I mean, both Protestants and Catholics have, for example, deemed someone to be a heretic and then treated them on the bit terribly on the basis of that, even killing them. And so, but my point is that assigning demonic activity to something that has
Mhm.
nothing to do with demons at all is dangerous.
Right.
Uh,
Mhm.
there was a Christian named Isaiah Salvador who's in deliverance ministry, and he
Oh
said
my
one of the
goodness.
signs that you might have a demon is intrusive thoughts. Great. So literally
You know
every
how broad
so
that is?
like literally every human being ever. Thank you for calling my human
No,
experience demonic.
no, I don't think he's entirely wrong, but you really gotta narrow stuff like that down. You can't
Yeah.
just, well, granted, he probably has a lot more to his own
Oh, no,
video, but
that
you
video
can't just make a
I
claim,
swear.
and then that's it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like, oh my goodness. No, I agree with you
yeah,
entirely. I mean, because one, I believe there's a difference between evil spirits and demons. So there's that. And two, I believe that there's a separation between demonic and evil spirit activity and human behavior.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
difference there. I always associate it to this, and I promise I'll let you
Mhm.
go. But for example, sorry, there was an error on my OBS. Um, the serpent was involved in Adam and Eve, but when it came to Cain and Abel, all of those issues Cain had were just Cain. There's no
Exactly.
spirit, there's no
It
devil,
was
there's
just
no
Cain, yeah,
demon. That's purely
exactly.
Cain.
Yep. Yep. So, so I think that responding to Lil Ice Studios would be really good, and for the whole Christian stop being goofy thing, and important to point out for the both of us. So, real quick before I let everyone go, I don't have any particular announcements, but so you can ask people to follow you, and then I will play this like clip from Dante's Inferno that I think really accentuates the gospel, and that's how we'll end. So. Go ahead and
Awesome, awesome.
tell people where they can point you to, and I'll play that clip at the end.
Absolutely. You guys can come follow me here on YouTube at Christ in Comics. You can find me on TikTok at Christ X Comics. You can also find Christ X Comics on what's known as Redbubble as well. And that's where, in fact, you guys can be introduced to my Christian anime journals that I've created so that, young Christians can, of course, enjoy anime with their notebooks, but they're also being referred back to the gospel in that same vein. So definitely I encourage you guys to check out my platforms. On TikTok, you'll get to my link tree where you'll see my Twitter and my Instagram as well. And I'm working on creating a Discord so we can have a lot more conversations like this on a regular basis. So, go ahead, follow, subscribe, hit the like button on this video for my boy Izzy. Go ahead and give my man a follow on YouTube, TikTok, and Rumble. Let's give this man the support that he needs to move forward and truly make a difference in the world with this content. That's what I aim to do as well.
Yep. And with all of that said, I want to play this last clip that I think perfectly illustrates the fact that nerdy animated content can actually demonstrate the gospel that Christ and repentance creates victory over sin and the devil himself.
Let's do it.
Finally, I will reclaim my proper place in heaven. Behold, Dante, beyond the inferno lies purgatory, where awaits your precious Beatrice. But instead of you, I shall escape from this pit. All the souls in purgatory shall suffer and burn, and beyond purgatory, paradise itself. I will plunge the cosmos into chaos, and it is all your doing, Dante. Because of you, God will finally see me rule his creation.
No, I cannot be the cause of this.
There is nothing you can do to stop me, mortal. No one can stop me.
One can. Almighty God, forgive me for all of my wicked
Did he
sins.
just bow?
I forsake my escape. I give up even Beatrice. I belong here in hell and accept my just damnation.
What are you doing? A repentant soul in Juteca? Stop! Do not utter a word!
But grant me the power to keep your enemy here with me.
Stop! I command you!
Purgatory.